Okay, welcome everybody. We are live. I think our audio is good. I hope you're all doing well. Tonight I am joined by Gearóid Murphy. Known Gearóid for a good few years now. We've kind of gone back to the earlier kind of period when we were talking all about Trump and all in 2016, that era, when Gearóid was doing some of the earliest kind of analysis and investigation on the whole direct provision uh, scenarios that were kind of happening in Ireland. We were talking about that stuff back in 5, 6 years ago. And basically, Garrow's a solid guy, and we've done streams in the past. I haven't talked to him since Millennial at Christmas there with Millennial Woes. And you can find him. The links are below. He's got a website there with all these links on it, all these socials. He's on X. He's got a Rumble channel actually. I noticed in that list. I didn't know he had a Rumble, and he streams on X as well. And you can find me. My links are at the link tree there below. Tonight we're streaming we're streaming using Rumble. So we're on Rumble, we're on Odyssey, we're on YouTube, and we're on X. And if you want to interact with the stream, you can do so through the chat features on all of those formats, all those fora, and we will have a look at the messages there afterwards towards the end of the stream. So I'd like to introduce Gearóid. Come on in there and say hello.
What's the crack? Hello. Thanks for having me on. It's been about 10 years nearly since, or well, a bit less than 10 years, but I think it was 2018, 17, 18. We did some streams back in the day, and God, we were young. Like, I used to get nervous. I actually think maybe my first stream, maybe ever, talking was with yourself. So it's good to be back.
Yeah, I think that was Perception and Critique, probably, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was back when we just did. But yeah, because Critique got me to stream. Of course, I wasn't streaming, and Critique was way ahead with it, with seeing where things were going. To technology and everything.
Yeah.
And he was like, "We have to start streaming. Never mind videos. Get on with the streams." And he was dead right, because that's exactly what happened. Is the whole kind of online thing became streaming. But
Yeah. It
yeah,
makes sense. It makes sense. It's the best way to kind of get through stuff. You know what I mean? Like, in a way, writing is good too. Everything has its place, I suppose. But yeah, everything has its place. But anyway,
yeah, and that's it. Like, that's everything, every tool. But basically, what's kind of interesting about you is that we kind of saw the early MAGA stuff kind of happen in 2016. And there was a lot of excitement. And tonight we're kind of doing almost like a post-mortem. This is not a structured stream in any way. We're not going to be doing some major, excavation work here. But there's definitely, I think we share a certain cynicism for the last decade, like, and how it's kind of ended up. Because if you look at the trajectory of the Trump administration since he came back in 2024, it's a major shit show. Really, there aren't many gains for nationalists or even for the Western world in many respects. We're just kind of, let's be honest, it's Israel first, like with Trump, like, and this Iran kind of debacle, which it was so obvious this was going to be a disaster. This was obviously going to be an absolute disaster. There wasn't a single military analyst who said it was a good idea really to do this. And you just have kind of this administration driven by radical Zionists and whatever Pete Hegseth is, like, just TV anchor man or whatever.
coked out of his head.
Yeah, whatever he's on. Yeah, I mean, and it's all very right-eyed coded, and everyone knows what we probably mean by right-eyed. It's like you're getting the kind of image of, like, patriotism, but ultimately you're being misled. And that's hard to admit, because I was a big Trump supporter back in 2016. You remember me? I was doing videos at that time, just basically defending Trump. Which is pretty cringe when you think back on it. But, like, at the time, that was kind of a bit revolutionary in a way. That was the big thing. Like, it was a big deal in 2016. And then after a year or two of Trump being in office, you kind of realize, well, you're not really getting much out of this, and I'm kind of sick of defending this guy. And then when he got defeated by Biden and everything, and he went away, he looked so kind of down and out. And I may as well introduce my conspiracy theory here about this, is that I think Trump was basically just rehabilitated purely to do this operation that you're seeing playing out right now. this Iran situation. That's my theory, my little opinion.
I agree. I agree with that. Like the time when I started to sense it was, I don't know, just before, maybe before 2020, I started to see YouTube shorts. If you're just scrolling like mindlessly, um, scrolling, and there'd be videos pop up of Trump kind of based or something like that, presented for the chud audience, in a way to put a friendly look on him, or a good look, or like, the kind of owning the ridiculous college student or whatever, that type of like impossible to disagree with win moment or whatever, that kind of stuff for Trump. And the moment I saw that, I thought, this is appearing on my screen for a reason. It hadn't happened in the previous years. The social media companies were lined up against him. Google, after 2016, they had their team meeting on that and the rest of it. But that couple of years later, I mean, look at it now, 2016 through to 2020, and now where the tech companies are all lined up behind him. Mark Zuckerberg has got his perm and his gold chain and his wakeboarding and American flag, Palantir, you name it. Elon Musk, X buyout. It goes on and on with the social media and the tech overall. Teal. I'm trying to think of more of them. I mean, almost you name it, to be honest. There isn't a single remaining liberal sort of or progressive woke social media. They're all playing the based
Yeah,
washing
based
kind of
is the
thing.
new woke, pretty much. Like
Kind
that's
of, yeah.
the new thing. That's the new hegemonic kind of thing, almost. But in reality, you're not even getting that really. It's just a facsimile of it. It's the image of it. It's the presentation of it. But it's the aesthetics. But you're not getting the meat of it, like because ultimately it's all dedicated to this kind of multicultural kind of hip hop loving, like, militaristic thing, which isn't even going to help America. It's not even them. They're not going to get anything out of this. They're just. I
Mm.
mean, they're more in debt than anyone. All these guys. I mean, when I saw them building up the military and saying we're going to, the first thing they went for was the military. We're going to take the woke out of the military, and I'm thinking, yeah, I bet you are, because you want all those white fellas to go out and die fighting Iran. Like you
Yeah,
can.
and the college campuses in America, like one of the questions people have now is, where is the mass protest against the Iran war? It's probably as or more even opposed than the Iraq war in the early 2000s, which was massively opposed by like liberals in a certain way, but it had a lot of support from sort of center, like counter jihad support. The war on terror, 9/11, and all of that was still fresh. So the Iraq war was heavily opposed, but also heavily supported. The Iran war has got all the liberal opposition and then sort of no support at all, really. I mean, the right wing aren't really into it, the center aren't into it, the normies, so called, aren't into it, the average person isn't screaming for it, and obviously the left aren't into it either. So, and yet there's no protest, nothing. I
It
mean,
isn't.
never mind a
It
million
actually
people in London.
It actually is the
Not
most unpopular war, like, out there.
ever.
It officially is. Like, there's data on that says it is actually opposed by more people. And Trump's rating now is he is going into this, like, they're going to be annihilated in the midterms. Like, they're going to be absolutely wiped out, and all that they're going to have to show for this is this nightmare, basically, that's playing out. And we haven't even actually experienced the consequences fully at all yet. Like, because of the delay in with the all the supply chains coming out of the oil industry and everything, like, all of that stuff, it's playing out in plastics. It's going to be fertilizers, because all the fertilizers are coming out of the oil industry as well. They're produced in those places. They're coming out of the Strait of Hormuz, a lot of it. And even if there's still some available through other sources, you're going to have this huge spike in price, which is not even priced in yet. Like, so every day that this goes on, like, so much stuff has been blown up already, that you're just
It's
going to have an absolute disaster, like, for years.
the whole brand, the whole rightoidism thing is completely cooked. There's the supply chains in the Iran war, which is going to be devastating. But even before that, you have, think of Trump like representing effectively Lex Luthor type people, the Teals and the Musks or whatever. The deepest of deep state stuff. And even with something like housing, we were made aware of this because Micheál Martin was there at the White House with him, laughing about the housing thing. But more generally in America, Trump has commented many times on housing that we want housing to stay expensive. Effectively, the kind of boomer argument of we want it to actually be expensive. It's kind of a good thing for the homeowners, you know, the kind of pyramid scheme of inflationary assets and all of that. You know, nobody wants that. No right winger wants that. No left winger wants that. I don't get what. I mean, I do get it. It's not a populist thing. He effectively was a Manchurian candidate for big tech, for the war machine, and for big capital, and it couldn't be worse. I mean, the liberal left isn't any better, but I mean, this is it almost makes a point of being crass about it.
Yeah, we're getting basic like by attaching yourself to Trump, like what you're doing is you are basically taking responsibility for these totally unpopular things. And the trouble is that this then is attached. All the rightoidism in the world basically is tied to this, and all of it is going to go down in a massive sinkhole after this midterms probably. And you know, this will be the last thing Trump ever did. Like, you know, like he will be seen as this colossal negative figure in history, basically, because of mainly because of this thing, because it's going to create such an economic disaster for everyone and the whole world, basically. And it's going to take years to try and get any of that right. And it's what it will do is it'll totally discredit any right wing thought at all. Any nationalism at all will be completely blamed for all of this. And you have people like Starmer in Britain, you have Canada, you have Carney, and you have these like neo-lib kind of or arch liberal kind of you know, managerial kind of creatures, like, who, yeah, I hate them too, obviously, like, but the truth is that they're actually far more competent. Trouble with Trump is that Trump will talk all this shit, like, and he'll just deny everything, deflect, you know, bloviate, say he's been saying mad things, like he's been saying things which are so outlandishly obviously not true, and yet, you know, it just doesn't matter, like, because there's a certain percentage of his base will just eat this up, you know, because of the personality cult. But like, you are tied to this. You know, this is the problem we're going to have now, is that we're supposed to have had 10 years of like based nationalism and restructuring of the economy to, you know, balance out globalization a little bit more for, you know, national in America anyway, you know, and you don't have any of it really, because it's all just hot air. Like, there's nothing behind any of it. All of these trade policies aren't going to come to anything either, because you can't just click your fingers and have all of this stuff work out. You know, the military is the same. He went in there basically on Netanyahu's kind of, you know, promise, and Mossad told him that this will be this proven. They had a meeting, like, and the head of Mossad basically told Trump, "Oh yeah, it'll be grand, you know, come on in." Like, and this is unprecedented in American history. Like, I mean, you go back to the Bush era. Bush frequently said no. Everyone basically said no to the Israelis when they encouraged them to try and do this kind of operation in Iran. They've been trying to do it for 40 years, you know, and no one until Trump said, "Yeah, let's do this. Yeah, I'm ready for this," you know. And it's because he's so easily manipulated, because of his ego, because, you know.
Well, elephant in the room, not elephant in the room, but just you know, Epstein.
Yeah, well,
I know it's a bit trite at this point. We all know about Epstein, but I mean, they have something on him. It's not normal. The way he's being walked around the place, it's absurd, to be honest. Actually, that's the best word I can think of for the whole situation. The covering up of Epstein, the Israel stuff. It's like, it's not even a fringe theory or whatever. He is owned by Israel. He's not just loyal or leans Zionist or something like that. I mean, he is 100% controlled by these other powers, by the deep state, effectively, the Zionist state, the Palantir type of stuff. He's just I don't know, some sort of Caligula type of figure acting on behalf of them, presenting as a lunatic a bit, but I think it's really just kind of pathetic and strange to see, to be honest. You know, but then on the other hand, he does have that loyal cult following as well. It's kind of tits up, to be honest, because they follow him no matter what he says. So he carries that with him. He basically bought that out with the cult of personality for 3 or 4 years when MAGA became a thing, and it was basically that brand was just sold off to big tech and to Israel, and we're just dealing with that now. But it's not going to last, obviously.
It was very obvious when he was, I thought, when he was on his return, like in 2024, like, and he's running against, what do you call, Kamala and all.
Kamala.
And I mean, it was pretty obvious that, like, she was a terrible choice as a candidate anyway. But he just looked so much like, because anyone would just, like, he has such personality, because he has got a very dominant kind of, outgoing kind of personality that's very memorable. Even if you hate him like that, he's very good at doing that kind of publicity thing, like. But, like, it was very obvious when you looked at the people who were excited about Trump. It was Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, like they were talking, about, and you look at the whole cabinet, Kushner and Witkoff, whatever it is. They're doing the foreign policy, real estate developer Zionists from New York. I mean, he's talking about, like, going into Palestine and turning it into like a big development.
Yeah, it's so funny. Witkoff and Kushner going to Pakistan to meet with Iranian diplomats for talks. It's absurd. Like, two Jewish Zionist bankers or whatever they are acting as, like, what is that, like, going to represent? It's kind of absurd. I'm trying to think of an analogy for it, but it's kind of hard to think of one. I don't know, like, yeah, I can't, to be honest. Like, how can Iran speak to that? Not even seasoned emissaries or politicians or anything, just straight up part of the cabal.
Literally, like.
And it's just ridiculous. And the whole thing, it's not really about Trump at the end of the day. It's about the brand, the politics of it all, the ideology of it all. I've been totally alienated, or felt alienated for the last few years, especially in Ireland, because it's on a delay. MAGA happened in 2016 in America, but it began to happen in Ireland, a sort of a shamrock lion version, as you have on your screensaver there.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to who was on X. I think it was Panger Bond created that, so I just stole that graphic because it's always stuck in my head as a hilarious satire of the whole thing. Like,
but it's been absurd here for the last few years. It's in the wake of the COVID thing. Once we came out of COVID, and there was sort of a new form of populist right wingism in Ireland.
Yeah,
it was like it just took on this kind of totally different thing where all these characters started emerging out of the woodwork.
That's very interesting. You're saying that to me, because I was thinking this at the time, and I didn't hear anyone really say it, but it is like that. It's like a whole new movement because of COVID. Basically, a whole new movement was created around COVID populism, and this kind of and ironically, Trump is the guy that created Operation Warp Speed, and it's like these guys are supporting Trump, telling me how great Trump is. Like, well, he's the father of the vaccine, and he still goes around bragging about it.
Yeah, it's gas, isn't it? Yeah, that's. I mean, you could go down the list of Irish new populists, like New Age and new populist rightoids who lick Trump's proverbial, and regularly because he said something about Muslims and about foreigners or whatever, let's say. But yeah, no, he he's the Mr. Vax, like, but just nothing about that. I don't know. The thing is with that crowd is that 90% of them are just kind of naive. I think they will come around in a few years. There's a learning curve to this stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing is seeded too, and I'm not doing this thing where I go around calling this and that person a Fed, right? To use American language.
No, we're not going to do that.
No, we're not. We're not. There's no point in that, and it's a fruitless thing. But just generally speaking, most people are naive to it. But the thing was seeded too. I mean, I'm not going down the paranoia or the accusatory angle in particular, but generally speaking, these things don't emerge out of nothing. You look at in the American context, the Twitter buy up by Elon, Like there's examples like that are just kind of staring you in the face, and you can shut me down now if you think it's kind of like too baseless or whatever.
No,
But
no.
you know, like the entire idea of Elon Musk kind of blows my mind. This Tony Stark figure who is a billionaire who does SpaceX and Tesla and this and that and fucking underground train tubes. What is it? I don't know. You name it. He's doing all this stuff. He's like a maverick. He's cool, like Tony Stark, and he's directly involved in it all too. He's like that much of a tech nerd. That much. He barely sleeps. He lives in a Spartan room, and he's just constantly toying around with all these ideas. He's a boyish innovator and all of that. Yeah, that's not real. You know what I mean? That's just me, but like that doesn't exist. People specialize in certain areas. They accumulate a lot of capital, maybe, but that's a bit of a brand as far as I'm concerned. That came about and then was plugged into X. The
Mm.
idea that you can buy X, I've said this before, but you know, it's no different in China. If some maverick billionaire went to the equivalent of an auction, you know, where you raise your paddle, and if you outbid, you outbid, and it's yours, right? The idea that along those lines, a billionaire can just kind of buy it, the political public square of an entire regime, like the West writ large, the American-led West, that he can, against the interests of the deep state, just kind of raise his paddle at the last minute to a gasp and grab it like that is just preposterous, you know. And the fact that it immediately lined up with this rightoidism. He's constantly supporting choice candidates across the West, your Maloney's or whoever the latest one is. Oh yeah, Elon does all this stuff. He's making rockets and cars and all of that, and he's intimately involved with the details of the cars and the rockets and all the rest of it. But he also tweets 500 times a day. He
Yeah,
never sleeps.
and he plays all these games and everything, like, and he has these high score. Like, how are you possibly a gamer? Like, you're running like fucking 50 corporations.
It's not
Like,
real. Elon Musk is not real. An individual named Elon Musk exists, right? But in effect, he's an actor. Maybe he owns the rights to all these things, and maybe he had some involvement through PayPal and set up Tesla or what. I'm not saying he's done nothing, but as we know him, he is effectively a deep state American brand to sort of take ownership and diffuse responsibility for a lot of this stuff. And X was totally a part of that.
you say X is a slot machine, like that was like, because you were on X a lot longer than me. I only joined X about a year and a bit, a little bit, about a year and a year, not even a year and a half ago. And I mean, I don't remember X really in the pre-Elon days because it just wasn't here. You know, someone would send me a tweet and I'd look at it manually. But like, how big was the change when he bought X in your view? Like,
I mean, it was just like the whole thing of, you know, you're seeing Mark Zuckerberg wakeboarding with an American flag and like, you know, Kid Rock music or whatever. That whole thing. The UFC was, you could see was, this is to answer your question. That whole, basically the vibe shift, right? The whole UFC kind of related like masculine. We're not pussies. We're not woke. Kid Rock, the podcast circuit, you know, the bro podcast kind of thing. That whole vibe shift happened overnight, and Twitter was the same. You know, you would get banned for saying misgendering someone or whatever, but then suddenly the space was opened up, and that's where the temptation is, of course, because now we can speak, and that's indisputably a good thing, especially for a dissident like you or I. But with that, of course, comes the you know, you're allowed to speak and you're allowed to voice your opinions, but ultimately it's sort of shepherded into your choice candidates, the likes of, you know, Farage and Lowe and Maloney and Trump, and where they have a handle on the Iran war stuff as well. I mean, there's a lot of criticism, anti-Zionist criticism, all right, but there's a lot of Zionist botting as well. Here's one to answer your question, right? What did I notice in difference? The emergence of these weird accounts with emojis like flags, like the Irish national flag, 10 emojis like that with muscle arm emojis and stuff like that. I know I sound like a lunatic saying that, right? Because it's like, what sort of deep state phenomenon is that? I don't know. I don't have the answers, but that never existed before. Whatever that aesthetic was, like you're lying there, and to get back to Ireland, how that fed into the Irish populist thing, it took on this whole uh, weird caricature vibe. The way Tommy Robinson is in England, like if you were a Hollywood B movie scriptwriter and you said, "Okay, England, what are they like?" Oh, they're like what is it, chavs or whatever. They're Fred Perry and all of that, and you basically spit out Tommy Robinson, and it's sort of bulldog nationalism. Churchill, all of that. Look at Robinson with the Zionism attached to him, the Churchillism. He is effectively espousing regime Western ideology, right?
He is.
I mean, as if he cares about, like, as if any. I don't know what the word is. Chav, maybe a less insulting word, but I'll call it a. You know what I'm saying? As if they care about some policing issue and public rules in Iran, a country like Iran. It couldn't be more obscure. And Tommy Robinson is saying we need a regime overthrow of this and that. It couldn't be more obvious. And then in Ireland, you had this. It was worse. It was like we are. I don't know. Like the way Americans keep asking if the IRA are going to intervene with migration or something like that. A sort of an American idea of an Irish, oh, don't fuck with the Irish. And these videos of like an Irish fella sparking out a black fella in some fight, this kind of fodder.
From 15 years ago in Italy or something.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's like, it's kind of an American point of view. You don't fuck with the Irish, like, I don't know. I just see that kind of schlocky Irish nationalism, Irish with like a plastic sort of a shamrock attached to it. It's just when you see that, you go, that doesn't come domestically, really, does it? Like, it doesn't strike me as a thing that emerges domestically.
There's a sense that what you're describing there, and I'm aware of it, I think we all are, if you're on X, but there is this in a sense that there is this artificiality and astroturf kind of nature to like some of these accounts, which you're like, is that a real person? Who is this? Like,
Yes.
There's a series of narratives like that they tend to hold to, like, so one of them, the obvious ones you hit on there, is the Zionism, and there's the particularly going after Islam. Islam is the problem, whereas most of the immigration coming into Europe is not Islamic. Like, it's people from India, it'll be different countries in Africa or whatever, and so on. But like, what it does is that it does a number of things. It keeps you from basically looking at from the perspective of what's good for Ireland, what's good for the West, what's good for Europe, but instead you're focused on opposing Islam. And you see, I would look at that as a kind of if I was going to be like a social engineer in the background, that's kind of what you would want to do. Like, in order to uphold the Western liberal, anti-racist, kind of capitalist, kind of pseudo-socialist regime. So what that means is that's what I consider our system to be. Like, we have a combination of capitalism and socialism, but the socialism is all designed to promote multiculturalism, anti-racism, mass immigration and everything. So ensure that there's a support system in place when you're bringing people to the country, and the actual capitalist system itself is just big capital being able to move capital and resources around the world. And so what you're actually doing by taking on purely an anti-Islam stance is that you're basically saying we want to take the sharp edges off of these Muslims so that they all get liberalized and become gay, and they integrate perfectly into the Western liberal kind of system. And that's what people like Robinson really do, is that he's basically saying, well, as long as they don't do this and they do that, then they're as British as everyone else. And this, and it's the same in Ireland. There's Irish as everyone else. And to me, this is actually far more subversive than an open anti-racist kind of so-called Marxist or whatever, who would be going mad about racism or whatever. These kinds of people like Robinson are far more dangerous, because he takes the people who are most likely to be at the coalface of facing these problems, and he gives them a false solution. It's support Israel and fight Islam. And I'm not saying you have to like Islam, but you're not looking at the problem from our perspective. So you're straight away, your perspective is skewed and you're being led down a path. Yeah. And that's what all of this Twitter populism, a lot of it, to me, is why I don't like a lot of it, like, is that it's go out and march for what? What am I marching for? Who am I? What are our objectives here? Like what are the objectives of this march?
The big thing too is that and which is my big issue in the last few years, is that it's it seems to me all about driving partisanship. So as you see with American sloppyism, like think of the worst, most like kind of abject accounts, slop accounts on X in America. If there'll be some, it's just the kind of bait stuff. So it's like black people or Muslim or whatever, doing something like basically a black person doing something violent to someone in America, right? And it's like, okay, that's rightoid bait, but it'll say like this is Democrat run cities and stuff like that, you know. So you, if you know anything, you know that that's a propaganda thing. They're there to stir up your emotions on a primal level, on a racial or a tribal level, and then direct it into a narrow political party branding thing. And it's so obvious. It's like, okay, so you're trying to drive not just political partisanship in terms of ideology or culturally, but actually directly to a $1 billion funded party thing, like a crook fest, effectively. And it couldn't be more obvious. And the same you see in Ireland, you know, the partisanship that it's always about the left and the wokes, and you know, so they pick up on these issues like immigration and the transgender thing, and those things. Obviously, I've criticized a lot of that for years, but it's kind of, it's like, it's grand if you're talking about those things and critiquing those things, but to what end? What are you trying to drive? And it's to me, it's just this kind of banging your head against a wall partisanship, much like the left through NGOs are driven to be demented about a fella made a racist comment or whatever, instead of kind of trying to synthesize real solutions to problems, trying to dialogue with the so-called opposition, instead of sort of ameliorating partisanship as much as possible. So you can be trying to walk in the opposite direction to partisanship, or you can be running headfirst into it. And that's what a lot of this populism seems to do. It wants to drive petty partisanship as much as possible from the right. So it's
Yeah.
always about the left. It's always about that college student with a bull ring or whatever, you know, and blue hair. It's kind of like
As if
I'm just
they're in
not into that.
charge, as if they have the power, as if the
Exactly.
weird blue-haired chick is, or whatever it is has the power in our society. And that's obviously not the case, you know. And I see exactly what you're saying there. Like that's a dialectical, managed dialectic, and that's like a kind of a cliche of the conspiracy scene of it's a managed dialectic. And you know, you always get this whenever anyone suggests something happened or it didn't happen, it's all fake, it was made up, and it's all, you're being managed. It's all Hegel's dialectic, but of course, a dialectic is just two. It's just two things like basically in conflict. And so what we're saying here is that there's a managed left and a managed right, and we're not allowed to basically come to any kind of meaningful, unity, or any kind of take any kind of, sophisticated kind of analysis here. So I'm supposed to hate the left and hate the right, but in reality, most of the people kind of directing politics are not even that ideological, from my experience. Like they're not really radically left wing. A lot of
No.
these ideas are what Bosco,
And
who I stream, he calls them sophisticos. Like they're just libs, shit libs, basically, who kind of are into the current thing or whatever. You know, they're not really that ideologically tied to these things like the way we think. You know.
no, and if you like, I've had a few run-ins with so-called lefties, and if you say to them, "Look, I oppose immigration. I oppose this, you know, for this and that reason," and I'm not talking about soft walking it. Like if you're just real about it, you know, very often the actual ones, if you go to any of their like meetup things or, you know, conferences or something, and you get chatting, it's actually very possible speaking face to face, which we're so sort of is such an alien thing these days because of the online system. But very often you can stand there and kind of go, "Yeah, no, you're human. I'm a human. I'm not like an evil, crazy person. Nor are you. I'm sure. Let's talk about it." You know, and that just becomes impossible. And we've spent years studying it on the left, the whole NGO complex, which is very, very, very real and very unfortunate that the left allowed themselves to kind of, over the course of however many years, 20 years, 40 years. I know you study this stuff a lot, but whenever it happened, it made rubbish of any kind of left. And I just, you know, the same thing has has basically happened to the right now, and just I see all I can do is try to like interrupt that or try to criticize it, because and you end up with two sides that are just completely at each other's throats, devoid of any criticism of the system, really. And I'm against that, and there have been stirrings of it among left and right, trying to make it sort of happen a little bit. And it's worth discussing. I'm sure there could be a critique of
Yeah.
that. Oh, that's not possible. You're naive, and the left can't be negotiated with. They're too woke, and they will do entryism, which is a concern I would definitely have.
Mm. Yeah, I
But
mean, I think X kind of monetizes a lot of the kind of the conflict process, you know. So you'll have these very popular kind of like X accounts that get like just like tens of thousands of views and likes and whatever and shares, and they seem to have all these legs, you know. They seem to be able to just their stuff just goes out, you know, and it's just picked up. So just what's that account Killian? You know that account Killian in Ireland, like that, or supposedly,
exactly,
you know,
yeah, yeah,
that's what
it's the
comes to mind.
weirdest
Like,
thing.
is that a real person? Like, what am I looking at here? Like, I don't
What
get.
on earth? What on earth is that? And it's probably one of the best examples, because I mean, it's out there. It's at another level. But you know, we're all just sitting back, kind of going, that this is not natural. You know what I mean? This is not
Yeah.
normal. Whatever that is, it's like something designed. Again, I said like a B movie, Hollywood schlocky stuff. But that's at the next level. I don't know. We know inherently when we see it that it's weird, and it is pushed. And he's talking about chaining people to radiators and whipping them and all this weird like gay stuff. And have you seen that? I haven't imagined that. Have you?
See that? No.
You haven't seen that? Okay. Well,
Who's doing
anybody in the
that? Yeah,
chat
he
can
was
back
doing
me
that.
up. It's a theme.
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't do it anymore, but for a while he would like, and it's all directed to this Zionism stuff and right wing slopoidism, and but then intermixed with this bizarre other stuff. And yeah, he popped out of nowhere around the era, it seemed, when McGregor was like running for president and all that jazz.
Yeah.
Um, so hopefully someone in the chat can back me up if they've seen that. I mean, I know other people
That's
have.
that's crazy stuff.
But
Like that's
just
that's very toxic.
this bizarre alien thing, it's like a UFO's just landed and sort of all these little things have just run out. That's what it kind of felt like around 22, 23. It's like, what? Like, I know people who've arrived at their ideology gradually, and they've voiced their opinion for a while, and it's kind of natural. This is just something else entirely. This
I mean,
kind of
that account, particularly, like that's just a great example that came to my head. Like, but that account, like, I mean, that guy must be making a bit of money out of X, like, because he gets huge reach, you know. And like, I've never made any money off X. I know it's possible. Like, I know it's possible to get like if your tweets go kind of viral or whatever. Like, so like there is an incentive there. Like, so it's possible that he's responding to incentives, and it's like some guy in like India or something just running a bot or whatever, or just running the account himself. Some people have suggested that, like with him in particular, and some other of those accounts. But it seems to me that, like, if you were looking to manage as a kind of a to keep see, I think what the whole Twitter thing has done, like, is that or X, since Elon got it, like, and I'm grateful for the free speech, obviously, but I think free speech isn't the threat like that we might think it is, if you're still stuck in a kind of a glass box that you don't realize, you know. So, I mean, if these accounts are allowed to dominate, like, and even though you're kind of going, who would be listening to this account? Like, who would be following this and going, yep, that's great analysis there, you know? Like, why would you follow that account when you could follow like an obviously real person?
yeah, and
Um,
and you'll see like 700,000 followers or whatever, and it's just odd. It's just bizarre. And the pumping out of the, I don't know, the slop. Like, okay, here's another video of an African naked running down the
yeah.
street, gone crazy or whatever. It's like, it's just a bit like I
Well,
think everyone saw that at a certain point and started like, what is this like?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think that keeps, you see, I think the reason that you would want to do that, like, is that kind of keeps the kind of the populist audience in an emotional kind of state, and where they're not moving into a cerebral state where they're really thinking through their problems, and how we're going to kind of react, you know. Like, I remember, like, we did streams and all, we covered different crimes and everything, you know, which is obviously was important at the time because there wasn't much coverage of some of these things. But like at a certain point, you're kind of like, well, everyone knows this shit, because I know people in real life, normal life, like who have experienced like these kinds of problems now. Either they've experienced some kind of crime, or they had some run in with someone from a different country and they were treated badly, or like this kind of thing now is actually so common that it's not just on the internet that you learn about these things now. It's like real life. So in a sense, like keeping people in that kind of reactive state where you're just talking about crime, and even framing the issue around illegal immigration and crime, I think that's a mistake. I think that's a major mistake, because again, it's not focused on your people. You're not thinking about your people. Like, I don't care if everyone who comes here doesn't commit crime. Like that's not the actual fundamental issue. Is what kind of country we're going to have. Like, that's what it comes down to. Like, it's not about, like, if you could bring 1 million Africans into Ireland in the morning and none of them would commit crime, does that mean you're okay with it? Like,
Yeah, and a lot of it is just economic too. It's to do with housing and pressures and all that stuff. So it doesn't matter who or what they are exactly. It's just numbers, um, in a certain way to some extent. But like, it's just, I think the big thing is the like, if you in the last few years were trying to say, okay, we get it, everyone gets the foreigners thing is too much, and like the woke stuff is too much. Now we need to get out of the echo chamber, and we need to basically. I think the biggest threat is having conversations with the left, and I say the left broadly, right? Anything along those lines. People outside of the right wing sloppulist bubble, let's say. The public already agree. Nobody wants immigration. That's settled. Now we need to advance the conversation beyond the echo chamber. So, if it's very clear that the partisanship is driven, because why is it that some lefty can't have a conversation with you or me, right? Some nominal lefty, because Paul Murphy and Mark Malone and all these NGO figures will be onto them and try and ruin their life as well and target them and whatever. That's not natural. Most actual ordinary lefties, if you speak to them, they're like, I don't mind talking to you, but like they're afraid of getting in trouble. And on the right, then it's hard to have a conversation from the right, because you're trying to negotiate with like a sock account with like 5 million Irish flags, an Israeli flag, a Union Jack, and a Stars and Stripes, telling you that it's all about the left and what else? Supporting capitalism almost, supporting Zionism, supporting figures like Trump, and Tory kind of stuff too. It's like, well, it's very hard to have a conversation with the left, of course, if we're going around making a spectacle of ripping down Palestine flags for the likes of Ezra Levant. That's kind of getting in the way, So it seems to me that there is on left and right across the board, there is an agenda there to drive that and to keep us from having conversations with each other. And that's the wall I see as needing to come down entirely. It needs to almost be studied, and
yeah,
some sort of new ground rules need to be come up with. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that like left wingers, when they come out a little bit in support of an open conversation with the right, end up having to apologize for it and stuff afterwards. That whole thing needs to come down, because everyone's against the Epstein stuff. Everyone's against billionaire finance capitalism. I think most people are against immigration, right, center, a lot of left wingers. The reason we don't hear them talk about it so much is just because 99% of them are afraid of the 1% in their own cohort. And then we're weighed down by sloppyism, driven by Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and all
yeah.
their underlings. So we have
And
to just get away from that somehow.
speaking of, like, you're describing there, like how we're managed, they're managed. Like, there hasn't been that much like research on the right. There's research that shows like that, there's certain characteristics of people who are left and right, whatever. But there is research to show. There's a guy whose books I have come across called Gabriel Rockhill. He's an actual like Marxist, like a real Marxist, and he kind of did this whole, because the way in the Cold War, basically, there was this huge effort through the Congress for Cultural Freedom to basically fight communism basically in across Europe and everything. And so they had that, and that was all that was going on at that time. You had European unification through the early European community, that was all going on. But you also had this fight against the Soviet Union and against their international movement of communism, and that definitely can be shown. Like your man Rockhill, like he definitely shows in his he does videos and everything talking about this, interviews, um, where he says like that they actually created the modern left in that time, basically by basically divorcing it from like the economic, because Marxism is supposed to be like the materialist analysis of history. Now, I'm not a Marxist myself, and I know you're not, but like it's important to kind of know what things are and to kind of know where these ideas are being mutated and being merged with other ideas. Like, so I would say personally, from what I've read over the years, like, and kind of try to research, that the modern left is kind of like a post-Marxist lifestyle kind of left, which is basically blended with liberalism. And I would say that since the 60s, increasingly, this is where you get things like, the green movement comes out of that kind of effect, the anti-nuclear kind of Luddites in a way, like almost afraid of technology, like uh, trying to get because they want to get rid of certain energy sources, but they don't want to go on nuclear. You also have the militant anti-racism, which has a kind of a history in Marxism, but not as much as we like to think. Like a lot of this is actually, I believe, from my research, which I'll be talking about in the coming weeks, is actually being driven by the state. Like I think the liberal state and international institutions and networks are basically driving this kind of anti-racism that we live with now. Through organizations in Ireland like ENAR, which are integrated European at the European and world level with other important networks. And, turning the left away from the kind of economic analysis of looking at, like, how are working people being treated? How are, large financial institutions interacting with the economy, etc., and focusing them on LGBT rights, anti-racism, green politics. This is like the Social Democrats. Social Democrats are a great example of this.
Mm.
Like that actually totally prevents the left from being a real threat to the actual economic stroke, what they call superstructure or whatever. And instead, it uses them basically to fight the natural resistance to these things on the ground, which is what we're kind of experiencing as kind of just normal kind of people, like, dealing with diversity. Working class people generally are the first ones in every country to deal with diversity. If you look at the British situation, it was the places in first of all, it was the coastal communities in England who first got the people coming in on the boats and all during the war. And then after the war, they were spread out and they ended up in places like Bristol, Bradford, and so on.
Mm.
And this was
Marseille is another one.
Marseille, yeah. And
Yeah.
France was going through the exact same thing. That's a great point. Like they were going through the exact same glut of immigration. For them, it was coming from like North Africa, and
Mm.
um,
You
and
know,
our problem is coming from that kind of that's that whatever that is, like that period, and that's where it really starts to become a problem. Like, and the left really was kind of like only a tiny part of that originally. If you look at the people who were really managing this, the institutionalized kind of liberal people, like they were kind of looking at this in a much more kind of practical way, and they were saying we're just going to have to move these people around, and they use the left. I believe they use the far left basically as the kind of counter gang to
yeah,
kind of clean that
it
out, manage the dirty work,
kind of like like the Fianna Fact on X and some of these accounts that have been raising the idea of stakeholderism. I don't know what they call it, stakeholder capitalism, maybe the idea of a stakeholder, and you see that with so many things now. The one I raised back in the day was the public participation networks in communities, and not to retread that thing, but you know the idea that you have a group, and it's the same with the IFA, Irish Farmers Association, or any of these. It's all these institutions are effectively bought out and integrated into the regime, where if you're a farmer, an ordinary farmer, you think the IFA is representing you to the government. So they're willing to throw down on your behalf against the government or the regime. But actually they work with the regime and are managing you on behalf of it. And the same goes for public participation networks, right? Obviously, so you think that they are going to take your concerns to the government and play hardball to have them addressed, but actually they are coming from the government to you to ameliorate your concerns, to push them aside, and to basically act like they're representing you. And I made a thing about that with the asylum towns and all that, but it was actually just a window into into how the entire society works, and the so-called democracy and the participation and conversation, everything at the university level. The conversations had there are totally limited and sort of staged effectively in the media. And I think the left, from the post World War II left, just became another stakeholder. Effectively, they can represent the the concerns of the working class, let's say. So, trade unionism and all of that, fairer deal, fairer wages, and then it just morphed into this kind of joke over time where the workers' interests were not represented. The LGBT ones were, the migrants ones were, and all the rest of it. And speaking of Marseille and all that, I don't want to just go on and on, but I studied the heroin outbreak in Dublin in the early 80s a few months ago. I kind of deep dived on that for a couple of weeks. And it occurred to me that, I mean, it's been written about, what's it called, the politics of heroin, and there's a big literature on this stuff. It's not a crack.
I've seen there's a funny well-known kind of LaRouche book on this, which I've seen. I have a copy of it there. Opium Inc. or I can't think what it's called now. But yeah, there are other books you read, right? Like tracing the roots and everything. Yeah.
There's the Fort Bragg cartel recently and stuff. And I know it sounds like a weird tangent to talk about heroin, but it relates back in that when I was looking at the roots, and this could be a whole thing, but heroin effectively managed by the regime. I believe this is kind of like the African American theory that they hollowed out our communities and stuff. Whatever you make of that, it's effectively kind of like the same theory, that it was ran from the Golden Triangle and ran from Afghanistan, and there's all sorts of stats I could mention to totally back that up, right? Ran from Afghanistan during the war there with America. But I started tracing the nodes through Europe to try and find how it got to Dublin and how it hit Dublin overnight, and Glasgow and Amsterdam. And something like that could happen, and that the authorities would just step back and just let it happen, as if they're just powerless, like it, how did this kind of all happen? And I studied that, and I kept seeing, that there was this funny interplay where you would actually have left and right in Europe over the 60s, 70s, and 80s and beyond played a big role kind of allowing it. So you had this like right-wing sloppulist mafia connected stuff going on in Italy and in Marseille, anti-communism, right? That was a big thing. So you can find a lot of leftists who study this and say that right-wing counter-communism, Cold War stuff was used to smash the working class and smash unions, and to ultimately be brokers for heroin and kind of introduce it. And that's a very interesting analysis, and there's a lot of truth to it. But then you look at every migrant slum in Europe where you see drugs to this day, go to Berlin, go to Paris or whatever, these same channels in these inner cities that run drugs are full of migrants. And they're also full of Antifa and this decrepit form of Antifa leftism. It's ugly. It's almost a child would get scared if they were in an area like that. This all the symbols daubed on the wall and the grittiness of it. It's filthy. It's like something out of a Batman intro with the filthy city is just rotten from the core. And you have leftist stuff all over that. You have NGOs running trafficking migrants who were effectively, and the reason I trace it back to drugs is because drugs came into Europe largely through migrant channels. So they would come in from the Balkans and through Turkey, and then make their way up from Marseille to Amsterdam into all these, and always heavily connected to the introduction of these Turkish gastarbeiter migrants and Albanian gangs and stuff like that. What do we see in asylum centers in the last 10 years? But nothing but Albanians. And there's crime running through that. And you have the left, so-called, covering for it, because again, they're just another state stakeholder, along with the right in a lot of cases. But yeah, my point being ultimately that the left just became a hollowed out stakeholder for power, effectively, and you
Yeah.
can see it everywhere.
I think a lot of it is there is a class aspect to it as well. Like I think what you're saying there is absolutely correct. Like I totally agree. But I think one of the other reasons that it was so pronounced is because of the impact of mass education, mass third level education since the 60s as well. That's the other big thing. Like, so what that has produced is this massive kind of middle class professional type population, you know. And as we all know, like from dealing with like looking at these NGOs on the ground and everything, that they're basically like a middle class employment structure, like that. You know, it provides careers for people who otherwise, well, what would they be doing? Like, what would someone like studying sociology, you know, and who's a militant anti-racist, how would they be using those skills if there wasn't ENAR or you know some of these anti-racist organizations
Yeah.
basically out there to employ them? You know.
And you know the irony of it too is that the irony is that it's a downstream effect of capitalism, or you could call it technological process, kind of the interplay between capitalism and let's call it the division of labor type of theory, where we were hunter gatherers originally and everyone just had to work at that, and then we innovated with agriculture, so now one guy can do what five guys did previously, and so the rest can do some other kind of job. Their labor is available now for something else. And then you got up to the steam engine in industrial England, and this whole basically the Marxist theory came about then to be like, what happens now? And the way I see it circling back, to use language like that, to the NGO thing, is that machines do a lot of what humans used to do. Even in let's say the 70s, you would have a secretary and a stenographer and all this kind of stuff in a corporate and bureaucratic, civil and public sector environment. And then the internet came along. And so a lot of those people don't need to exist anymore, to shovel tons of paperwork. So what do? You create, you have all this surplus human capital out there, and you come up with industries that effectively enforce and entrench power further by getting them to advocate for you. So you use up increasing amounts of spare labor, or call it redundant human capital, and you introduce it into a system where their basically only job is to reinforce and entrench power. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with tens of thousands of people who work in these industries, effectively, and universities and all the rest of it, and communications and propaganda. It's just that's what the state has available to it, which is just a whole ton of people who can. That's their job. It's kind of dystopian when you think about it. It's like, what? Okay, so you're a person who has a point of view. You want to advocate for it. You identify true nature of power, and you're hit with a tidal wave of people who are paid to oppose you by
Yeah.
the state. I mean, it sounds like I'm making that up, but
Yeah,
that's actually how it is.
They present themselves as the alternative to that. You know, that's the funny thing, is that they're very good at presenting themselves like we're the alternative. We're actually fighting the system or whatever. And like a lot of this, you can actually tell how artificial this is if you study the history of imperialism in any kind of like just timeline. And like the modern left still uses like a kind of a Leninist kind of interpretation of imperialism, and they'll insist that like the modern corporation is imperialism, what everything that America is doing is imperialism. And I actually think it kind of is imperialism, but it doesn't suit them, like, because they're basically kind of arguing that imperialism is racist. And I don't believe imperialism has to be racist at all. As a matter of fact, like in this forthcoming, I keep advertising this fucking article for the last 3 months, but it is coming out soon. But it deals all with this British race relations regime, basically, and it's got all of this like research I did looking at like how the anti-racist kind of stuff came about, like, and what you actually see is, just to totally support your point there, that this actually is a form of imperialism. Like, we are being manipulated, and we are literally having our society transformed like a colony in the interests of capital, in the interests of powerful financial interests, mega corporations, banks, you know, the World Bank, IMF. They're all diverse. They're all looking for, like, these corporations are not full of white men. They're like, banks are full of diverse populations. Movies, culture products now are all totally diverse. They're not full of white men. We are, and this, I argue, this is imperialism. It's just that it's not. It's an anti-white imperialism. But you could call it an anti-racist imperialism or something like that. But it is imperialism, and the left are still stuck with this 19th century idea of a guy with a monocle owning a factory. And you can see this when they're arguing about economics in the modern day. A lot of the kind of really radical kind of leftist kind of Republican types will say, oh, we know, they'll invoke James Connolly, and they'll say, we need to own the means of production. But that's a redundant model, because we live now in a service economy. We don't live in a mass manufacturing economy. So the whole structure, they are not, the left is in amber because they haven't actually upgraded their analysis of society and economics to suit like a post-Fordist, or whatever you want to call it, post-globalization kind of reality. They're still stuck in early to mid 20th century kind of ideas of racism, and as if the European countries are on top. How are we on top? We're a global minority. We're in decline. We're losing our manufacturing base. We've been totally kind of screwed over by the Americans, basically, and they haven't upgraded the analysis, and that's how you can kind of tell that they are basically used just because they're an oppositional force against us, basically, because we have the actual ideas to actually change all of this.
Well, and some of their analysis is valuable, because the problem is with rightoidism is that there's a complete lack of structural analysis of power, effectively. You'll have, and this is a general populist thing, always bugs me when people say that the country is doing badly, and Simon Harris must go and Micheál Martin must go. You see a lot of rightoids saying that now, and it's kind of like, well, okay, Varadkar goes and in comes Micheál Martin.
Nothing
I mean,
changed.
it's a lot deeper than your man or your one or whoever it is. It's a heck of a lot deeper than that. It's deeper than the parliamentary democracy thing. The real question is how is this society ran, in whose economic interests? When we work, what are we doing? What value are we creating? Where does that value go? When we buy a house, how is that value created compared to the bricks and mortar cost of it? Who funds it? What capital funds it? How is that derived? La 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 la. There's a total lack of that. It's just all foreigners and blue-haired feminists or whatever. So it's bad on both sides, and that's why I bring up the anti-partisanship thing. It's like, well, obviously, if some structural critic, Marxist, wants to come to the table and have a conversation with you or me, and figure out, well, where does the truth lie then? How can we diagnose this? Take, for example, the question of AI and UBI, right? This is a classic one where people say UBI will just lead to, say the UBI is €200 a week or whatever it is, €1,000 a week. That'll just become the new baseline zero. And these are kind of right-wing critiques. So that's one, and it's a legit one. The other one is that it'll take away the dignity of work and the meaning of life and all this kind of stuff. And it's a big lefty idea, woke. And I just kind of find myself going, well, if AI does what it says it's going to do to some extent, and so many people are left redundant, hundreds of thousands of people are no longer needed effectively, and the mega corp has just gotten 10 billion richer because it owns the IP for the whole thing, what are we to do? Okay, so they'll use that money then to rebuy even more property. They'll buy the air, they'll buy the water, whatever. Obviously we need some way to deal with that. A rightoid will just tell you that's lefty, right? Okay, to say we need to sort it out one way or another. And then a leftist, a Marxist will support infinite immigration, will support sort of UBI, blind UBI that misses the point effectively of value, and supply demand creation, and it kind of doesn't really address the reality. The best way to solve that is forthright, open conversations between everyone. Doesn't matter whether you're left or bring your ideas to the table and let's discuss them intelligently. And yet that seems like such an impossible prospect. How could that be? such a normal idea, which is let's talk about things, it seems virtually impossible to do. You're stuck on either side of a problem, both
Yeah.
sort of missing it.
Yeah,
How,
the right
yeah,
eye thing is a huge problem. Like that is the fundamental. That's what's really being created with the Trump era. Like, is it has totally. And if you look at what they've done with Trump, is they've used him to totally like he has been GOPized. Like basically, it hasn't been the other way around. People are telling themselves that the GOP has become based and all that. It hasn't happened at all. It's like I did this post a few months ago about rightoids. I was like, what are the characteristics of the rightoid? And you're hitting on them there. Like, I mean, it's like it's all about the feelings, all about the aesthetics. There's no actual content to it. Like all about personalities. You know, this person, get rid of this person, and then that's the thing to get to do. Like, and you're kind of going, well, if you get rid of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, but you're just going to have Sinn Féin and like the Social Democrats or something and then you're going to be even more unhappy by your own standards. Like so, it's all very like emotional, unthinking. Like you're encouraged not to think and
yeah, exactly.
X rewards it
It's idea free. It's almost taking pride in ignorance in some way. I don't relate with that at all. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like an aesthetic aversion to ideas
Yeah.
and thinking about stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a problem there. Like, if
I
that's
bet
the
you've
case.
had people say to you some version of like, "Oh, look at you with your big books and fellow with the
Yeah,
books and ideas," and you're like, "Well, man, I don't know about like at least there's ideas in my fucking head. Like I'm not saying I have all the right ones, but like at least I'm trying. At least I'm seeking ideas. Like if you don't have ideas, then someone is manipulating you through your emotions, and that's what the right eye really is. You're just like a puppet on the strings, and you don't know what the strings are all doing, but they know it makes your arm move, makes your mouth move, makes your head move. But they're not thinking, and it's such an obvious problem with Trump because people are basically defending the indefensible with this. Like when this Iran thing kicked off, I remember having an argument with a guy on X, like he's kind of a Zionist guy, and I don't get offended when people are Zionists. Like you're entitled to be a Zionist if you want. I'm just entitled to say you're wrong. But like this insisting that it'll be over in a few weeks and they're destroying Iran and it'll be grand, and you're kind of I remember 10 years ago when this was like the exact thing that people were voting Trump into office to stop doing. Like, and now here we are, and the people who are the biggest supporters of Trump are basically, because they're emotional, because they're totally controlled by their emotions, are basically defending the opposite. They're basically defending John McCain's foreign policy.
mm. And
It's amazing to me. Like,
the thing you get as well is like the Punch and Judy thing, where let's say left wingers ostensibly we could criticize for being too utopian, unrealistic, and like they say, what is it? It's pathological altruism and all of that, right? But the thing you often get as a sort of a mirror or like an opposite of that is a thing that's driven on the right is a leaning into sadism. So something like with the wars, which is very handy, of course, for the power structure, that you don't care about innocent people being bombed in Iran or whatever, or Gaza. I think we should just wipe them all out. That kind of stuff. It's like, well, yeah, you're kind of handing that to the left winger there, right? It's a lot of people getting killed, and because they're again, it makes me sound like a sort of like a blue-haired college student.
yeah, it's like
When I
Trump is
start,
the chicken.
because
Trump
I
is the
start,
chicken thrown over the shoulder.
exactly. I start going. These people are human beings. Is it okay to just bomb them for reasons that are unclear to you because they're brown and because they're Muslim? And again, the rightoid would go, "Whoa, you're starting to sound like a lefty." And
Third
it's
worldist.
like, wait, how is that making me sound like a lefty? That very frame, like I know I'm having a hypothetical conversation with myself here, but you could see it being a real thing. You go just because they're brown and they're Muslim, you're supporting them being mass murdered for reasons that you're not quite clear on. That's kind of fucked up, right? And they'll go, "You're starting to sound like a lefty." And that's kind of like, well, that's the problem. What the fuck is a lefty
Yeah,
in your mental view? Someone who's not sadistic or willing, going along with a thing like that. If that's your version of what a lefty is, then that's not me. Like, I have my own definition of things, but you're stuck in the matrix effectively if you're thinking like that. And it is the leaning into sadism again, the kind of the same accounts that'll tell you it's all about illegal immigration, and kind of, shy away from it that way, will be the same ones who put up stuff like a black person doing something bad or whatever on some video, and they'll say, "Look at this animal, look at this animal," and they can couch the animal comment by saying, "Well, he was being violent."
Yeah.
But clearly, it's you're leaning into the kind of red meat of that.
Yeah.
So they'll give you the
He
red
was in a
meat, and they'll
Democrat
give
City.
they kind of say the more sadistic, the more like kind of cruel, almost like a caricature, like, oh, like I desire nothing more than to put them all in carriages and escort, deport them into the sea or whatever, that kind of thing. It's like I'm all for mass remigration, to a certain point, not deport every last person, but it's that kind of thing. When you see that driven, where someone goes, no, no, it must be all of them out at the crack of dawn, scare them as much as possible, have it be as like sadistic as possible. That kind of shit,
Yeah.
is a driven thing. That's not natural to people, to be
Yeah.
that way
I think
either.
that's actually a product of impotence, that like that kind of
Mm.
let's make it personal and nasty and going after the person. Like for me it's not personal at all. Like,
No.
like it's actually it's much more about, well, what are we doing with our society. But this thing of the like leaning into like, oh, you I bet you wouldn't, like, kind of shock jock kind of stuff, like, oh, I bet you think I wouldn't say
Yes.
that, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I just did. But in reality you've no power. So
Yeah.
you're like a kind of a you're kind of performing like online, but in reality you're not, you don't control the police, you don't control the immigration authorities or anything. So all of this stuff is just for the birds. It's totally meaningless.
Yes.
Just
And
let.
it also, again, it drives partisanship, right? Because you go back to being a person who's vaguely liberal left, vague, sane in a way, really, a sane sense of conscience or whatever. I totally understand why, for example, any deportation of any sort, uh, someone with a liberal sensibility would say, "Well, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that," la la la. And I think that's an insane idea, and I could explain why. But I get it. I can to some extent get where you're coming from. It's all unfortunate business. The whole thing is, it shouldn't be happening. It's an ugly thing that's been put on us, and it has to be sorted out. But yeah, it's not good. It's bringing human beings into this whole situation, and it's making a mess of our nations, of our polities, and all of that. And it has to be addressed and sorted out in some way. But I'm willing to come to the table and discuss what aspect of it do you find cruel, how much of it. Here's where I'm coming from. I'll be forthright with you. I won't hide the ball, but I'll, what are your concerns? What's not fair? Can I try to explain why I think it would be fair? I'm not trying to do performative sadism. Let's talk. You get, especially with X, and that sloppyism stuff. It's kind of it constantly leans into that. And so again, I know I'm like a broken record, but it's kind of like the both sides of the problem. And yet the logical thing would just be kind of points where we can agree a good discussion, and that can't happen stuck in rightoidism. So I find myself kind of lost a little bit. And yet there are good voices, like, you mentioned Pangerbone a while ago. There's lots of people around. There's good voices. If it could just be shorn away from that sloppyism, and you could see people on the left are almost want to reach out kind of a little bit too and have an intelligent conversation, but it's hard to happen within all that noise and constantly being like, if I want to have a conversation with ex lefty and go through all this stuff, on one hand you have the sadistic performative sloppulist calling you a cook for talking to a lefty or some shit like that. And on the other hand, Paul Murphy or one of them are trying to cancel the person for talking to you. So it's coming from both sides where we can't do this. But I think it is growing, the ability to say, okay, let's just walk away from the regime. Let's kind of go into the back parlor here and have a conversation away from the fucking the tone policers.
Yeah. And I think like you can learn from the left. You see, this is the thing. Like, I mean, you know, because the right-eyed kind of sphere isn't producing any, like, it's all just kind of instantaneous, like, a tweet comes, a tweet goes, like, there's like,
Yes.
where are the kind of landmark kind of analysis or books or whatever, I'm not saying you have to have a university department, but, like, the left traditionally has been cerebral, and it has been about, like, analyzing society in a very structured kind of way, and kind of, yeah, you could say they're subversive because they have got power in the institutions and everything. But, like, well, we need to be thinking this way because that's how power actually does work. Like, you can have a big following on X and you can influence people to an extent, but, like, unless you're really kind of doing the necessary kind of work, like, you don't really have a plan of what to do if you had power, or how to influence people who might have power, who might be in, like, remember that article we just before we came on, we were just talking about that article that I did during the week, and, like, look, that article hasn't been read by 10 million people or anything, but it is being read by people who are very motivated on that subject and who are close to that process, and therefore it's going to have an impact because it's just really solid. There's no
Mhm.
bloviating. There's no, like, I really hate hyperbolic analysis. Like, I actually don't listen to much political content at all, because a lot of it is just, you know right-eyed kind of bloviating, and Trump is great and he did this and we're going to fight the left, and it's all very much like, okay, I'm being manipulated here just to be a fucking idiot and just follow this, personality cult. Whereas what you actually do need to just do kind of the work. There's, like, an unsexy job of just having to look at certain things and then being able to bring people with you, like, and then, other person's ideas rub off of yours, and you create a kind of an intellectual kind of movement around that. Like, every political movement has its thinkers, it has its ideas, and, you can see with the right-eyed thing, there isn't any of that there. There's nothing there. There's no content to it. It's whatever Trump says today, whatever he tweets out. He's one minute he's your biggest fan if you're in the administration, and then he fires you the next day, and then, oh, that guy was a loser, he was no good, and I hate this, like, shrill, like, um dishonorable kind of way of going on.
Yeah,
That
and
really just,
even something that looks on the surface more sophisticated. The whole idea for the last 2 years in sort of the fringes of, like, right wing institutional right wingism in Europe has been remigration, 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 and that was interesting when I first heard it. But at a certain point, I started to kind of go, "It's just a guy in a suit at a sort of spruced up looking conference saying we need to deport the foreigners." And I was kind of like, that it was good to start with. It's like, yeah, okay, like, there does need to be remigration, but you see these various brands of it in different European countries, all the kind of same idea. And yet you kind of say, well, there's so much economic stuff happening, and geopolitical stuff happening on a global level. It needs to be a bit richer than that, actually. Not just like, I don't know. Do you did you recognize that at all? That kind of over and over again, and it's kind of not really going anywhere. Um, it's kind of
yeah.
just on repeat.
Yeah, I
Remigration now.
feel that. I feel that with the definitely. I know what you're saying. Like, there's no, like, cutting edge to it. Like, that's going to bring that about. Like, because it's not actually tied into the actual structure of any kind of power. Like, that could be wielded.
Yeah, and also, like, where does the migration impetus come from? How does their society become like that, as opposed to, let's say, China, which has virtually no immigration, or even the likes of I know I sound like I'm just shilling for left the communist countries here, but take the likes of Cuba, take other countries, random countries, you name it, Bhutan, or just countries all over the world of all different flavors, ostensibly don't do that kind of stuff. And yet in the West, we're, the whole world is looking back in horror at what's being done in the West. It's not just leftism. It's not just, it's obviously, it is basically the capital system, among other things. And I hear kind of none of that from, even like the remigration people. It's just kind of like a brand.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I know what you're saying. I know.
bit
I
lacking.
definitely see that. Like there is there's a lot lacking. There's not much content to it. And see, I think a lot of the impetus behind like one of the main reasons that we have this problem in the West of you know accepting large numbers of people from all over the world. Like there's a number of feeding factors. Like one of them is like the fact that philosophically speaking, I think a lot of it comes out of Enlightenment kind of thought and this kind of universalism. Like the West is very outward looking. I've said this a few times before, but basically, our like anthropology was created in the West. Like these other cultures didn't really have anything equivalent to anthropology because they weren't that interested in the world outside of their culture, you know. Whereas in the West, we're very much like, oh, what's that culture doing over there? And we need to go over there and we need to bring this and do that and you know, and bring civilization. And there's just kind of messianic desire in Western people, like, and it's in liberalism. It's inherited in liberalism for sure, you know, and um, so it's very much like, well, every man is the same, universal rights of man, and all the rest of it. And so this is very hard to kind of. It's very hard for Western people to kind of imagine that the consciousness of people outside the West who just don't feel like that. You know, they don't feel particularly worried about things like racism, even though their countries probably have way more racism in actual terms, like than anything we would have. You know, so there's this major issue of like how we actually view ourselves, and it's kind of killing us because we're so outward looking and outward focused that we're not able to basically kind of take stock of our own needs as people. We're not even able to acknowledge that we are a people. That's the first problem, foundational problem. We can't see ourselves as a people. You know,
and
that's
and
it.
yet
You
and
know,
yet though, even when even when communities and places find the balls, like we saw in the Netherlands recently, and Newtown, Mount Kennedy, and all of that, when people get a chance, you know, we're not inherently. I don't think we're inherently so sort of enlightenment uh, ridden that there's something missing in the mind too much. You know, like when it presents itself or when it wants to load up a little bit, it gets crushed, artificially.
mm,
Whether that's you getting sacked from your job or they just riot police show up and just beat everyone up, random people in Ross Cray or whatever. Um, there is a machine behind it that will protect the capital interest, the sort of effectively the money power, the state power. It goes to great lengths to do that. So I don't know. Like I don't know where I don't know if I'm convinced that Western people are sort of inherently predisposed to that. Like,
yeah,
what do you think of the idea of that the shackles were taken off and we were just allowed to be? Would we not just be
it's
like,
because it's an unnatural thing. Like it is a learned thing. Like that, all that enlightenment kind of idea, like that is a learned thing. It's I don't believe it's biological by any means. Like I think white people are absolutely capable you know, you see it in different countries in Europe. Even the Poles have a lot more ethnocentrism, and that's encouraged because they kind of border Russia and everything. So they're kind of, you know, it's not discouraged the way you see it in a country like Ireland. So if you compare Ireland to Poland, like Ireland has this kind of because we have the situation with the six counties in the north, we have been discouraged a lot from our expression of nationalism. We're not allowed to have that. That's bad. That's divisive. Whereas in Poland, you know, NATO tells Poland, you go all out. You go be, you can put the biggest anti-Russian stuff, you know, whatever, like because it's useful. It's a tool, you know. And so one of the things I've kind of learned about kind of enlightenment and post-enlightenment kind of thinking is that it's very instrumentalized. It's very much an instrumental kind of philosophy in a way. It's very much about using everything that exists basically to bring about a certain kind of end. So you're talking about that structure that exists. We can see that structure. You walked up against it when you were in down in Clare back in 2018, was it? When you were down there?
yeah, right then, yeah.
Yeah. Like you came face to face with a structure that is being created basically through local you know, PPNs and you know, facilitators are brought in basically to organize and orchestrate these kinds of public meetings which are designed to basically bring about a certain end. And that end is, well, we want people to let their anger out in a controlled way so that then they can just kind of sigh and go, well, I guess we've been we've had our voices heard. You can hear this in the analysis of the asylum centers, where people are saying, well, as long as the voices are heard, there's no one is saying it's just not going to happen. You know.
But sure, you like you get the same thing. A perfect example of that is the GAA, right? The Gaelic Athletic Association. What could be more stirring than that, right? Formed as a part of a revolutionary resurgence of our culture. What did Cusack and them say? Like, our race needs, vitalism and all of that. And now the GAA is a largely sort of, it's a lot of what I call this is the kind of it's the Joneses. There's a lot of that, the super value class, the kind of there's very much a keeping up with the Joneses type who kind of dominate in a lot of GAA clubs, and there's this sentiment there, and it's that kind of aspiring upper middle class energy has been sort of merged with this state takeover of the GAA, where they push within effectively of the grassroots like organization in little villages and stuff, and most members might oppose something that the state is doing, but the GA will actually support it. The right muckety muck at the top of the club or whatever will support it. And this was, I know I sound like I'm kind of waffling, but you saw this with the fuel protests. I don't know if you saw in Ahada in Cork, which is just right beside Whitegate refinery where the imports were being blockaded. The Ahada GA club decided to
Oh,
bring tea and sandwiches to the guards and let them use the car park.
yeah, I saw a
Now,
similar story down here where I was too, and like, if it's true, like, I mean, yeah, that was I saw that one in Cork, yeah, as well
well,
online.
the gas thing about it was that Ahada GA Club is sponsored by no less than Irving Oil, who owned that refinery,
Yeah,
a Canadian firm who bought the refinery. The state owned it for originally, and then privatized it, and then those companies got out, and the state took it back over for years. And in the last like 6 or 7 years since Irving bought it, they've made, it's debatable, but possibly like 300 to 400 million in sort of post everything profits, like post tax, post costs, maintenance, and all of that. They're making bank on it. And the state should really own that. They've proven that they could own it in the past, but no, it was hocked off to this Canadian firm who come in and then sponsored the GAA club. And the GAA club also has its diversity and all these different initiatives it all has to be part of.
mm.
So it becomes totally integrated in with the regime, where they're literally sponsored by the oil company. They're shot through with PPN type apparatchiks, like where an asylum center comes to the town and the GA now are being harassed by a local NGO person to do a diversity day, and all that kind of crack. Um, so our own, everything gets ingested into the blob, even something as rootsy as the GAA, and they actually do something as outlandish as bring tea and scones and sandwiches to the Gardaí, the poor creators.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most people in Ahada, members of the club, didn't want that, but totally gobbled up. Um, so you kind of have it with everything. It's the stakeholder thing. I really like that idea by your man Fianna Fact and a few others, that the idea of basically everything, every institution is bought into it. So what you have is a large proportion of the population support something like fuel protests or oppose migration. And yet there's no institutional thing at all. It could be a small community theatre
Organized
company.
minorities. Organized
Like
minorities are managing everything.
it could be a group where people get together and they do choral singing or whatever, right? But you look at that group and it's got funding and liaising and all of that with this blob, that it's actually integrated. It's not just a choral group that just exists on its own. It's sort of integrated in. You see it with men's sheds.
Mm.
Men's sheds are supposed to be a place for men just to get together, or old men. I'm not quite sure what they're for, but they're meant to be a very local thing. Imagine a bunch of older kind of men hammering away at things and fiddling with stuff and getting together and kind of helping with their mental health. That's a fertile ground, of course, for nationalist populism and all of that revolt, effectively, and it's totally contained. It's heavily. If you look up men's sheds, you'll see the list of sponsors and PPNs and all this kind of stuff, you're going, so is there no group out there of any type that is just its own thing, not bought in, not blackmailed by or sort of coerced by this system? There is nothing. There's no GAA, there's no Catholic Church, there's no Church of Ireland, there's no singing group, there's no I go around on that, but there is nothing. Everything is bought into it.
Yeah.
So you end up with the kind of scaldy masses on a rainy night in some town getting bet by the guards, and the local community group is bringing them tea and scones.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, if you look at an organization like Common Purpose, like I've kind of mentioned them a few times over the last few weeks, like, but basically, like, their whole kind of stated purpose is to do what you kind of described there, which is to basically kind of link all the different organizations together towards a common purpose, literally a common
Mm.
purpose. And like like the one who created that initially back in the early 90s was Julia Middleton, like, and she did this famous book, like, called Beyond Authority. And the whole principle of it basically is that, like, they are specialists at getting the people who, like, it'll be like like the upwardly mobile kind of people in society will be eager to kind of get involved with that. And because it opens doors, like, you get to know the people who own the different, large companies, the hotels. You'll know the people in the banks, you'll know the people in the government. It links the government with the media, with the, with business community and everything, and with the, obviously, the civil society groups and all. And what that does is like, what she means by beyond authority is that you get to basically collaborate beyond what your actual job description is supposed to be. Like, so by linking these different positions up in a kind of an informal kind of setting, like through common purpose affiliation or whatever, like, you basically kind of turn that into a machine that you can kind of direct. And that's kind of like one example of how that kind of thing can happen. That kind of a process can happen. And you definitely see it, like, with the multiculturalism, with the immigration, the integration efforts and everything. It's all done through the community. And it's kind of like, so they have a bottom up approach on the one hand, and they have, obviously, they have their kind of top level plans. You'll have a UN plan that wants to bring in migrants and whatever. And we all kind of, I've often written about things like that and talked about them, and people will say, well, how could that be? But it's actually, that plan at the very top is pretty much being facilitated from the very bottom up, so that it looks like it's a grassroots thing. You see the GA club down there, like, doing this thing, but in effect, it's kind of defending what the UN or the IOM, the International Organization
Yeah.
for Migration, or whatever, will want to do. Like, it's kind of, and the government, it's fulfilling what the government wants to do. And
And ultimately BlackRock, and just you name it, your whatever way you want to sort of frame ultimate power is being is you're seeing it at the ground level, the GAA, the any of that. Like that is the word I would have for it is just totalitarianism, totalistic. It sort of integrates everything. There is no religious or sports or any other group institutionally that exists that you can only talk about it on the internet. You can only gather in a huddled mass and get beaten up by the guards. But there's no institution you can grab onto, or entity or group at all. There's no way to organize because it's kind of shut down at every level. And coming back to the left, they're integrated too. Same way the GAA bring tea and scones for the guards, the left at Listune Varna or any of these places bring a form of tea and scones as well. They're doing the same thing. They're just another stakeholder. And the problem is, again, with like some of the right, you have your Patterto Beans and your Independent Ireland Gombeans and stuff. There's a right wing version of that too, a little bit. So it's kind of like this inescapable gas fog that you just can't. It does not allow you effectively to organize, to liaise with your fellow people at all. So tough one.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that kind of disarms us about, like, you've kind of described it there as kind of totalitarian, And the immediate connotation that you go to in your mind because of the liberal training we've had our whole life, basically, is that you think of the Soviet Union or fascism in Europe or whatever. But I actually think that Anglo liberalism is kind of what we're basically living under. The kind of we're living in that kind of timeline that where that kind of ideology kind of triumphed, so to speak, in the 20th century, and then we're kind of disarmed about the actual totalitarian nature of liberalism, the all-encompassing, totalizing nature of liberalism. And you see that through things like we've just described there, through how these narratives are insisted upon and kind of actualized in real life. And you can see it very much with the um, with multiculturalism, with diversity, how that is you are demanded. It's not. I remember. I'm old enough to remember like that. The propaganda around this stuff used to be a little bit different. Like it used to be like in the 90s. I was a very young fella in the 90s, but like you know things were a little bit less in your face with it in some respects. It was like it was the cool black guy, or it was like hip hop was being mainstreamed and things like that. And so you had like black characters in entertainment or whatever, and you didn't have this kind of hammer on the head like uh over the top kind of low IQ kind of diversity what you have now. Like
Yeah.
millennials, I think, have ruined movie making. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's shocking. Like the funny thing is about you said like the insistence upon these ideas. Here, take identity, right? The leftoid will say identity is just whoever happens to be there type of thing. So you can have someone who barely speaks English or never mind Irish, has an Indian accent. They're obviously Indian to any sane person in the world who got it's an Indian person, right? They might be living here. They might even have citizenship, but like to most rational people on earth, they go, "That's an Indian." Do you know what I mean? It's not even a Varadkar type where they sound Irish, and it's not like that. They're truly an Indian in every conceivable way, including probably if they were being honest, they'd say themselves, "Yeah, I'm an Indian, really." Like, that's fine. Um, but they say, no, this person is Irish in a way that's no different to you. They're a citizen. They're here. We're all Irish. We all eat potatoes. That whole lefty liberal thing we hear, right? But I was thinking about that, and it's like, okay, so identity is fluid. Identity is perceptional, and it's not rooted in taking drops of blood, DNA tests, kind of nonsense like that. Fair enough. So if it's a personal thing and it's subjective and people view it different ways, it's not rooted in anything concrete. I can kind of agree with that to some extent. There is such thing as you know, a fluidity. It's not like someone's either foreign or they're 100% perfectly Irish. Uh, you bring in the Normans and all this kind of stuff, right? I get that. I totally get that. It's on a spectrum to some extent. Fair enough. I'll buy into it that much with you. People have a different view. To me, that person isn't Irish. Is that okay? And they'll go, no. But I thought it was perception and fluid and it's a personal thing and all that. To me personally, they're that person isn't Irish. They may be a citizen, but to me, they're not Irish. And I don't have any power. But just to me, they're not. That's my feeling on it. Um, and they won't accept that.
Mean you
They
hate
won't,
them.
as in they won't. They have to
Mean, yeah,
insist that you have a view of identity a certain way. They insist upon
yeah,
that. And even here's not to go on too much, but like my latest idea has been the idea of Irish. So if we're not allowed to be Irish, can we be Irish? Like the same way you can have Polish Irish, Indian Irish. If they get to be that, we will cede the field on Irish and we'll retreat back to Irish. Is that okay? Is that okay? We live in a multicultural country.
yeah.
That
Can I
person is Indian
create
Irish, but
my
can I
own?
be Irish within that world?
Mm,
Because I am because I can't call myself Indian Irish or Polish Irish. I'm not. So, which itself begs the question: well, how does that make sense? Can't I be Polish Irish if I want to be? Well, apparently not. But okay, can I just be Irish? That's my hyphenated identity because that's what I am. And if that's the case, can we organize around that principle? Like if there's a Polish Irish club, can I have the Irish club? They go, no, banned, far right. So it's very much it's not about the words or something. It's about the concept of mind, the very idea that you have an identity is forbidden. And, that's one of those things that's just insisted upon. Even if you change the language, if you said, okay, we'll come up with a new word, just make up a word, gibberish word. I'm that. Can I be that? Peter Donnelly is also that. He identifies as that too. We all identify as this new word. It's not Irish.
Yeah.
It's just they go, no, you can't be that either. So I can't be that. I can't be whatever it is. That is a totalitarian idea. That is obviously stripping you of the ability to effectively be.
Yeah, and it's far more totalitarian than a lot of the things that they're calling totalitarian.
Of course, yeah.
Like they'll go rail against, like, oh, I'm being oppressed, or this is a fascistic, whatever, nationalism is fascistic, whatever, and they'll always try and invoke that is hateful. That by simply defining difference, by articulating difference, and saying, well, that thing is different from this thing, doesn't mean you hate it. Doesn't mean, like, I don't hate the color purple because I can see that thing, that object on the table in front of me is purple, and this object here is silver. It doesn't mean that you hate any of those things. But there's all of these things are projected onto the person simply for understanding their world, trying to make sense of their world and categorize things. The very act of categorizing things doesn't necessarily mean that you're saying one is better than the other. But there's all of these assumptions that go into this, and this is like, it is actually very pathological, like the way of thinking.
Speaking about like lefties and all that, the idea that it's hateful and the identity question, all of that, it does go back to the plantations as well. The justification for those, the Irish ones, were like the two big ones I can identify. You will hear coming out of the mouth of a lefty today. Now we're talking about the most rapacious colonial imperial capitalism imaginable, right? And yet the liberal of today will use the same justifications, which are one, civilizing a barbarian people effectively, that we are undiverse, we are backward, we are racist, we are plain and stale and all of that kind of stuff, and we can be enriched and enhanced by the massive importation of other people against our will by a foreign state, effectively foreign regime. And the other one is the development thing. They talked about the plantations because the Irish were living like barbarian peasant farmers, and we can develop Ireland and give it railroads and all the rest of it through the importation of these foreign people.
Yeah.
So it's development and it's civilizing.
Absolutely. That's the, like, I did that essay there last year about, it's the biggest essay I've ever done. It's like all about the 17th century and Ireland and Cromwell and Puritanism and how it impacted like the kind of state at the time, and how they viewed Ireland. And one of the things, I read this book in the research for it about William Petty, like, and because like race didn't exist as a concept at this time, so it's hard to kind of picture this. Like, we've got this consciousness of what, like, because we've been so, beaten down with propaganda, anti-racist propaganda. Anytime we're supposed to think that the past is just all full of racism and all, but like, how they viewed the Irish was that they just wanted to assimilate the Irish basically, and to make them into Englishmen. And so when they came to Ireland, like, they just said, well, we're going to basically break up the develop. We're going to create towns, and we're going to, do organized agriculture, and, create big farms and all. And they didn't. You won't find like racial language. You won't find like language, saying that there's some biological difference between the Irish and the English at the time. Like, they're just looking at it as like, well, we can actually mold humanity. And that's actually, like, that was the earliest phase of imperialism basically in Ireland, and that's how they view it. Like, they actually viewed it like almost like there's this thing called transmutation in alchemy, and a lot of them were into alchemy and all, like William Petty and all, like, and they viewed it like, is that we can actually create what we want, like, with these people. Like, so the idea was, they were like, Petty had plans to like bring in like 10,000 English women from England, and then move 10,000 Irish women from Ireland to England, and to intermarry them, so that you would basically just do away with the differences, and just create.
It's just It's totally just like today. I mean, it's the
Okay.
most naked form of like demented sort of I don't know what you call that, plantation mindset, I suppose. You saw the same thing with the British in the likes of Hong Kong and Singapore back in the day, with hundreds of years ago, where to break up nationalist, basically Chinese Han or whatever revolts, they would bring in Sikh constabulary to bust it up. And you
Mm.
see the same thing with the balaclava security guards and all the rest of it. Same thing with trying to integrate the guards
If you look
or
at
whatever.
South
You know,
Africa, which is the ultimate example in the 20th century of like, like the warning of like, a multicultural society or whatever.
mm,
If you look out, like it was the British brought the Indians there originally to South Africa, and the people who actually became some of the main people in the anti-apartheid movement were actually the Indians, because they were like they had a really strong sense of who they were and everything. And like so it actually created like there was a guy called Kader Asmal came to Ireland in the 70s, and he actually created pretty much the Irish anti-apartheid movement himself, and carried all these people around him then. So it's like,
interesting.
yeah, wherever imperialism is actually multicultural, like it's like because you're literally having to go to all these different nations, these natural kind of nations of like this group of people, this ethnos or whatever, and you're basically trying to integrate them into an organized political structure of some kind.
Mm,
And so the next essay I'm doing is going. I'm just going to fucking plug this shit eventually anyway, but it will come out, I promise, in a few weeks. But basically, it looks at that, like, and it looks at how that period in the 20th century, when the British Empire is being wound down, because obviously they've lost. There's a whole, what happened with the war now, but like they're trying to plan about what are we going to do? How do we maintain links with the colonies? How do we maintain India? How do we manage Pakistan, India? How do we manage South Africa? How do we manage all of these places? And there's all these just conferences and all this being held, and they're trying to basically, this is where modern race relations comes out of this time. This is the fascinating thing I've learned, is that this is where this like modern race relations comes out of international relations. How are we going to manage kind of unwinding the the old imperial structure, and how are we going to bring these peoples and nations and new nations in Africa into a kind of a global structure of some kind, which the left will call imperialist. They'll
but
say it's
like
imperialist,
this is
but
the
they
thing.
won't say the anti-racism is imperialist.
This is what I can't figure out is like what this is why a conversation would be useful. I'd like to ask one of them like what is their theory for the whole idea of scab labor and all of that and this imperial moving of people around and that as we see in Ireland. How are you going to address the capitalist kind of blob without being truly nationalist, to some degree or other, insofar as that's possible now? Um, and they'll kind of, I think they say it needs to be an international socialist sort of pushback. So instead of like trying to hang on to our country ourselves, we need to unite all the people of the world, but of course, logistically and culturally and linguistically and in every other way, and just numbers wise, that's completely impossible. Obviously, the organizing principle would be around place, people, culture, language, familiarity, kinship, and all the rest of it. A national identity effectively would make sense, and yet they're so allergic to that. I again, this is where the left have a lot of ideas, but they're completely bankrupt with this stuff. It just doesn't. You can't get around that question, that plantation question. How can you have a socialist uprising or whatever change while in the middle of a like rampant plantation, like from Queen whoever she was, Victoria, or Cromwell? Um, how can those two things align? So I think the answer is some sort of international something or other. Doesn't, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's one of the questions I'd like to ask them.
they'll say basically what you're saying. They'll say that like we have to have organized, anti-racist, organized kind of resistance, like they'll call it, and that'll mean basically that all of the working class, which that most of them aren't a part of anyway, because that's the people that they're mainly at war with. should
Mm.
all come together and resist racism. And listen, like none of us are actually racist. These terms are just like when they say like they're anti-fascist, what they mean is they're just anti-nativist because fascism is just irrelevant at that point. At this point, anyway, fascism was simply an economic program that just acknowledged, native realities at that time in history. It emerged because of the things like, the Great Depression and everything drove all that. Those kinds of progressive and collectivist kind of economic ideas were popular because people were broke and because people saw that like, liberalism had gotten out of hand. With
Mm.
the banking collapse and everything that happened, the currency collapses in Germany and everything. So like but what they're actually when they say, "Oh, you're fascist," like they actually don't even know what it is. All they're talking about is like you are ethnocentric, and you're saying, "Well, I'm going to prioritize my own people over these people," which is what everyone else outside of Europe does.
Yeah,
Only us is the problem with this,
like Iran deported millions of Afghans recently. There was barely a mention of it, right? I didn't hear someone giving out about that. Some liberal, just irrelevant. Is Iran a fascist country? Uh, Pakistan did this very same with Afghans as well. There are lots of examples of this. We
I would
saw it
say
in
China is like China.
Tunisia.
Large.
China don't even let them in to begin with. Tunisia did a bit of this. Are these all fascist brown countries, or is Iran the same as China? They have different systems, as does Pakistan from Tunisia. I'm sure so are they just like they're sort of nationalistic, ethnocentric to some degree, and they deported people. And there wasn't much noise made about it. But are they all like fascist Lord Voldemorts, or it's kind of just silly, really? Do you know?
Yeah. No, they you can really see that they actually are a managed thing. Like the organized left has been completely defanged. They're not actually oppositional to liberalism at all. And what they're actually doing is they're actually shoring up liberalism. They're operating for liberalism because it allows them to have they have good jobs, they have good career prospects.
Hmm.
And if they were actually opposing capital and what capital actually wants, they wouldn't have these jobs. Like you don't see any fascist college lecturers. You don't see people openly espousing like National Socialism in a in on a in a university in Dublin. You just don't see this, like, because it's not allowed. You know,
Hmm.
so you can see where the power is, like where the power is, and you can see how they're serving the power. Their narrative of history is tied to 19th century ideas of imperialism, which is irrelevant at this point because we live in a totally different time. So
Yeah,
that
and
you
yet, and
you
yet,
saw that
and
with
yet,
the farmer protest. They couldn't actually articulate. Like most of them were going on about like as if these farmers or lads that own someone owns a contracting company is some land baron, with millions of euros. It's
the
total
Kulak.
bullshit. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
kulaks, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, that was interesting. All right. And a lot of some of them were saying, well, I kind of support, standing up against the power, but I'm just worried that it's kind of far right. This kind of nebulous like concern about it being like, what is it exactly that some people say, oh, there's too many foreigners. Is that really the be all end all? Like, that possibly someone, one of among the crowd says, oh yeah, I'm not all for so many foreigners coming here. That's your big like jumping off point. Something as normal really as that, as human as that, um is where you cannot be involved. You agree it's a big revolution, but you have to wash your hands of it because of something as ultimately trivial in a certain sense as that. Something as sort of run of the mill, that people are skeptical of too many foreigners coming into a country, in any country in the world, in any time in history, forever. Totally natural. The fact that not only is it, you're saying it might be all far right extremists, you're saying that there might be a touch too much of that flavor in there, and that makes you have to hold your nose and walk away. And yeah, the whole idea that farmers own tractors as well. That's a funny one. Um, Alienating the left. That is funny, isn't it? That they like, and I get it to some extent. There could be. I know you don't like it, but I get the idea of like a big haulage company that hires Ukrainian migrants with the taxpayer funding it, and they're a bit of a muckety muck. Maybe not like a Banty, but a bit that way.
Yeah.
And they run a sort of a pretty substantial one. Like there might be some who are millionaires. There could be an element of that, sure, some, but what you saw was the liberals going off on the idea, the
Class
very idea
hatred.
that the very idea that a farmer owns his tractor,
Yeah.
or
Like
just
what
owns
he needs that
like
tractor
wait,
for.
farmers owning tractors is a problem. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that makes them a kulak. The
But
fact that a
it
farmer.
shows that they're not actually involved in any kind of business or any kind of real life kind of economic activity. Like these are people who are working in, maybe they've some kind of academic position or something, and they're able to indulge this kind of nonsense. Like, but they're not actually, they don't know normal people and normal life outside of like the kind of the managerial state, we could call it, like, like
Mm,
they're coddled, like they don't actually understand like that. Yeah, I mean, you can disagree, you say, oh, fuck the farmers, whatever, I don't care, I don't mind, like, but the most of the reasoning that comes out of them is basically class hatred, where they're saying, look at these smelly cultures coming up to Dublin and blocking the road. That's what it amounted to, like that was the level.
mm,
And then when you ask them for like, well, like, do you not kind of see like that they're, that's a bit racist, or a bit class hatred you're expressing. Can't see it. Like, same people are whinging about someone, calling someone names or something who's black or something. You know what I mean? Like,
mm.
and they're like, we need to exterminate these farmers. These bloody boggers need to be exterminated. That's the way they're talking. Like they're using eliminationist rhetoric, talking about a couple of guys on tractors.
Oh, it was the same with the inner city Dublin protests, the
Yeah,
O'Connell Street and all of that. That all these what did they call them? There's a scroats. I don't know how they came up with that one, but they called them scroats and scangers and all that. And they need to be bet black and blue.
yeah,
That's the language of some lord. These uppity scum need to be whipped. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Who do they think they are? You saw that totally come out after O'Connell Street, and of course Dublin totally. Those inner city communities completely hollowed out between the drugs and you just see some young fellas and some lads going around on scooters robbing people and all that. It is bad. I'm not that much of a working class hero or whatever. I'd never pretend to be. I'd be all for anyone who does petty crime or especially violent. They should be hammered. But insofar as an individual does that, but we want an orderly society and all that. So it's not like I'll just lament for some fella on a scooter who's going around, causing trouble in general. But you have to look at these communities holistically. It's like, you're living out in South Dublin somewhere, and these lads have to walk around. I don't know if you've been to like Talbot Street or any of these lately. It's hell. Um, and they have no chance. They're not going to work for an NGO and get 120 grand a year job or whatever. Like, they're in a bad position, and to just call them kind of scangers, they were first in line, and like you said earlier, it's always the working class communities get it first. Um, so there is definitely a class hatred there,
yeah.
and
But
and a suspicion as well, a deep suspicion. These fellas in a pub talking, what are they saying?
yeah,
That kind of thing.
yeah, it's a very it's there was a sociologist that I kind of liked, but he was actually very much involved in stuff I wouldn't agree with necessarily. But he was like a kind of a lefty, but he was a Jesuit priest called Micheál McGrail. Was it Micheál McGrail? I think it was Micheál McGrail. He's from Mayo, like, and he was a sociologist, like, and he was in Maynooth and all for a while. But he coined this term for what happened in Ireland since the 60s, like, and he called it the embourgeoisement of the Irish nation, like, and what he means is that through, mass third level education, the explosion of the state in terms of scale, basically. So you had the explosion of state jobs and everything. This created these values that we now have, basically, and it created a whole class of person who has benefited greatly from liberalism, from the extension of the liberalization in Ireland since then. And you can see them, like RTE is a great example, like, full of people, like, and they keep getting all these bailouts
Mm,
and obscene salaries, and it's just they're producing nothing but garbage. You couldn't look at it, unwatchable garbage. And, like, and that's it's the same way all across society. Like, we have all of these institutions, academic institutions, cultural media institutions, and uh, and there's a whole class of person basically who operates that machinery, like, and they are doing really well. Like there are two Irelands, like, and you could see that with the farm fuel protests, that there are two Irelands, and one Ireland is doing really well. Like they are doing really well economically, and that's why they really don't like people saying, pointing out the reality that, young people, people under, let's say people under 40, are living in a totally different economic reality, unless they happen to be in one of these unicorn kind of sectors where they're doing really well. Maybe they have a nice multinational job or something like that. But
Mm.
unless they get a nice state job or a nice unicorn, job in Amazon or something, whatever, like you're probably just struggling to buy a house, if at all. And
Yeah.
like I can't get over how this has been normalized. Like, I mean, I think back to when I was that age, because coming out of school and all, like the idea that you wouldn't be able to own a home at some point, that was just never part of my thinking. I was always of the mind that, yeah, I'll get a house someday.
Mm.
You just do that. Like, it's just like a normal thing. But this has now been made like normal. Oh, yeah. And you see young people, I've seen a video of young people, I think they were in college in Dublin there during the week, and they were basically being asked, like, do you think you'll ever own a home? You might have saw it, I don't know. And they were all kind of making these kind of mealy mouthed kind of responses, like, well, I can't see it now, and you kind of like, why aren't you fucking angry with this?
Mm.
Like, I would be fucking out of my mind with anger, and the
Yeah.
fact that like so many of them just couldn't muster, like they all wanted to kind of appear cool and like, oh, I'm not bothered, of course, I'll probably just emigrate. And I'm like, man, what's wrong with you, like,
Yeah. Totally. Like the you have this kind of patronage system as well, a little bit, where this move towards uh like the right to housing kind of stuff. There's elements of that. There's a kind of almost like a feudal system where um you can get a house if you, and this is not to be like classist or whatever, like a middle class form of classism from myself, but you know there's so many schemes these days. I don't know if you've noticed that, for getting a house, or Cluid and all that kind of stuff, that it's almost easier to work in a shop and get a Cluid house, or whatever.
Throwback,
There's all
like,
these, well, not even Dolmax, even just low wage. If you're just on a low wage, you actually could get your arse into a house. You'll be on the list for a while, but you might get one. Whereas if you're uh, anything under, like the squeezed middle, I find it must be massive at this point,
yeah.
especially if you count it for under 30, let's say. Um, because the same person who could have the same salary, if they're 50, they're kind of grand because they got their house on the fumes of a former time. So, but if
Mm.
it's under 30s, if you're under 30 and you're under 100 grand, trying to get a house, depending on where you live, it could be a big struggle. Whereas if you work in a shop, in a grocery shop or something like that, you might get into one of these schemes.
Mm.
So it's almost like you have to be very well off, or a state subject, and in either of those cases, you might get a house. But the people in the middle. I mean, it's a classic, a trite almost point to make, but there's always been a squeeze middle, but now it's kind of, it encompasses so much of the country.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. It blows my mind. Like,
Downward mobility, like in real time, you're seeing it, like,
oh
because
yeah, yeah,
these young, like, I'm thinking of friends of mine, even like who were my age or maybe a little bit older even, and like, like they were from Dublin and stuff, and so they grew up in Dublin, in a
yeah,
nice part of Dublin, like, and the parents like managed to like buy houses at the right time in the 90s and all, you know what I mean? So, and selling them and buying, and then they ended up in a nice place,
yeah,
and you're kind of like, that is the archetypal like difference in generations, because their children had to leave Dublin. Then none of them live in Dublin anymore,
yeah,
and like they're out in different parts, like spread out, like, and one of them isn't even in the country actually, but like would love to be in the country. That's the sad thing about it, is that he would love to be in the country, but like now he couldn't possibly afford to move back. And so you
yeah,
have like the family is then divided out. the boomer parents kind of have plenty of money theoretically, like they have plenty of money, like they're never going to be in any trouble, like um because they have
And
different houses and stuff and made money, have
but
a nice
like
profit, but like
just think
the kids are downwardly mobile compared to their parents,
think of how out in the open the I want to use the R word, the ripping. I don't want to be crass. The how much we're being abused here, right? Um, and the intergenerational decline. So what in just the last week we've seen the sheds thing, right? Progress Ireland and all that. So we all go in the shed or some sort of box thing out the back. I mean, it's just it's mind-boggling how low we've kind of gotten and
Yeah.
how it's just drifted to this point. But so okay, so you have the boomer, right? The boomer owns the house. Boomers are pretty grand. Like, I mean, I know, the squeeze will come on them as well, but capital wise, they have the house, they're late in their life, they own their lawnmower, they own their car, they own their house, that kind of way. I don't know, but maybe their week to week will get tight. And it's kind of, that's intentional as well, sort of the inflationary thing to some extent, in order to, I'm going around in circles. So we have the boomer owns the house, the aging millennial who's like my age, 35 or older,
Yeah.
and they stay in the bedroom, their old childhood
They have
bedroom.
their Star Wars toys and like
Oh yeah, yeah, the
stuff.
Game Boy out and everything.
Yeah.
But like, no, I don't want to insult. Like, it's shit. To be in that position, right? But and they have to, have to deal with their mother and father and all this thing. Um, and they're like 35, haven't had the child yet, trying to get on the ladder. They're actually in a decent job. They just can't afford the house. So it's not that they're not working. They're working away. They're on a half decent wage. They can't buy a house. And so eventually they hit the wall, and it's that we're going to go along with this government scheme now and build a shomer out the back, and that's it, right? And then on the other hand, they're squeezing boomers for what liquid money they have with all this inflation and the rest of it. And so I saw it was like Fine Gael or something was talking about. Oh, it was
Oh
like
yeah, I saw
you,
this. This is
you
It's
saw it,
Fianna
yeah.
Fáil. It's Fianna Fáil, and it's basically in France. They have this thing where you can, if you own a house, you can create like a kind of a contract to sell
Yeah,
your house when after your time when you die. You get the equity out of your home before you die, so that you can stay in your house contractually until you die, or I guess until
yeah,
you're senile, or I don't know, whatever. But basically, I looked into this and I was going to do a tweet on this and I decided not to. But basically, I think this is going to be like a way of just getting the equity out of the boomers before they die.
of course,
And so
yeah. But
the home now will be basically owned by, because the only people who are going to get onto a scheme like that to be able to, because it's all going to be regulated by the Bank of Ireland, the Central Bank of Ireland, right? So that means you're going to have people setting up some kind of like financial instrument company to basically manage these kind of contracts, and or it'll be like it could be hedge funds, it could be people who own insurance companies or whatever, could be doing things like that. But it won't be like young fella and young one in their mid 20s trying to get their first house.
hmm,
They're not. This is going to take the property that maybe they could have inherited from their parents, and it's going to give it to a fucking insurance company or some kind of other company, basically. So that the wealth isn't going to be passed down to the families, basically, like, and it'll be all taken out before they die. So even when you die, your children won't even inherit anything. It's
yeah,
just
so but that's the thing. It's all being ripped out in real time, like right in front of us. So like you millennial are going to go in the shed, but the house is going to be swallowed up by effectively the state, so that the boomer can keep living or whatever. Um, and then there'll be elder care or something like that, and that's the whatever that's called, the something scheme. This is what I'm talking about: scheme after scheme after scheme. But the whole thing is a carefully orchestrated plan to just uh, steal the eye out of your head effectively on a multi-generational level. And it couldn't be more obvious. Like, so the old person has to go to elder care because you're working a 9 to 5 job that has a 2 hour commute from your shomra out the back of the house that's going to be
yeah,
liquidated because you also don't have time to care for your parents anyway. And if you had kids, they'd have to be going to creche, and sure, you won't have them anyway to begin with. So the entire line is just being stamped out. And like if you were a millennial and you said, I'm never going to get a house, I'm trying and trying and trying, my best hope is, crass as it is to say, people will say, God help me, my mother and father, I love them so much and I don't want them to pass. But when they do, that will be finally the only time that I can exist as an individual person with a property and all the rest of it. And so, not to make a good thing out of death, but people are thinking, well, that's the only way because working isn't going to do it. But now that's being ripped out too. Like it's a direct imperial takeover by finance, by the state,
It's wealth
or whatever you
extraction,
want to call it. Wealth
basically,
extraction. Yeah,
because
like
they've run out of things to take money out of now. So now,
yes,
like,
yeah,
these
yeah,
boomers are there now, like they're big fat turkeys, like on a fucking
yeah,
rotisserie going around, like, and they're like, rubbing their hands, like licking their lips.
yeah.
I can't wait to get a bite of this. Oh, let's let's do it like a fair deal type situation. Fair deal is the thing they were doing with
Fair
the house.
deal.
They
Yeah,
would give your house and you get your nursing home, whatever. But like this is this new thing. I can't think what they call it, but it hasn't been signed into law yet. It's just a bill by Fianna Fáil, one of them. But
but
like,
it's coming. We know it's coming, and
yeah,
the shed, beds and sheds thing hasn't technically come in yet, but of course it's all orchestrated. It's coming, and they're basically stripping out the floorboards of the country, every last thing, right out from underneath us. Not even the future hope of inheritance is now off the table as well. They'll be ripping into that. Um, and yeah, boomers are the remaining last bit of rotisserie chicken. Like, I mean, after them, it's just oblivion because
yeah.
people were hoping to sort of, live on the kind of remaining embers of boomer wealth. But if that's ripped out now, and like an aging millennial who is, I don't know, everything's been robbed from them, especially Zoomers as they get to be 40 or whatever. There's no more boomers left. There is no rotisserie chicken left anymore, and now it's just a sort of a complete impoverishment. I mean, no kids.
Laughing, but it's actually awful. Like it's like this is what is so fucking like galling about these young people, and they're saying, "Oh well, I guess I'll never own a home," and it's like I wouldn't want to be far right now. Wouldn't want to be far right, like
Yeah,
Well, you can call me far right, like, but I'm not going to be a fucking sucker, like you know what I mean. If you're gonna put your hand in my pocket and rob me, like I'm going to say something about it.
yeah. And meanwhile, these houses are going up all over the country. These Dino boxes, new builds, and all that. Which, like, I don't want to sound like envious, right? I would take one, right? They're nice, but these kind of cairn homes, which is run by Morgan Stanley, shareholders of Morgan Stanley and Fidelity, and all these different investment banks from London and New York, and they're putting up all these houses and. Don't want to be far right or anything, but it's a lot of foreigners getting put into them for
Yeah,
free. I recently was driving through a Cluid, right, one of these,
yeah.
and oh, here we go now. I'm going to be a right-eyed and talk about Muslims, but again, she might be a lovely woman. I don't know, but out the door, I'm driving along these brand new gaffs or whatever, right, and a woman comes like out the door calling the kid to come in for his tea or whatever, and she's in full Muslim garb and she's speaking whatever language it is. The whole idea that she's like Phil Lynott or something. She's not Phil Lynott, like, you know what I mean. She's foreign through and through. Like, I mean, she's speaking the language. She's all garbed up. She's clearly not someone who's been here for a ton of time. And I'm just kind of going, wait. So there's Connor and Neve who are sitting there in their shomers out the back while their house is on the way to be liquidated from their parents or whatever. And like this person must have arrived in must be the last 5 years. Based on what I can see of her, this is a fairly fresh off the boat foreigner,
Yeah.
and she's in some sort of like a house that would cost you 300-400 grand to buy off the market.
And the Irish
Um,
government has committed to every like person that leaves like the direct provision system, like, or whatever it's called now, like in the next 6 months is supposed to have what they call their own door accommodation. This was when they got rid of direct provision, this was the promise. So the government has agreed to provide basically housing for all of these people that they're bringing in at the same time that they're telling young Irish people, well, hey, tough shit, you know what I mean? I guess you just
yeah,
don't get to have a family.
yeah, that's
And
it.
oh, we have a shed for you. So you can use, instead of actually using your money to actually purchase your own home, you can actually just throw that money into renting a shed in the garden of someone else's house, who, when they die, will probably end up, the equity won't even go to you anyway. Like, it'll,
Yeah.
like,
Like what are you
you
going to do?
own, like, yeah,
Like, as in, where are you going to get your shed towed to?
yeah.
Like, once the house has been liquidated, where, like, if you can get a crane to, like, remove the, because you're no longer allowed on the property because it's been sold on or whatever to a bank. Um,
And
like, what do you do with?
when the actual shed, that's only going to have a lifespan of a couple of decades. You throw all this
Oh yeah.
money into it, you use all the infrastructure. When all of these gardens that can have a shed in them have a shed in them, what then? Where are we going to start putting sheds then? Like, do we start doing 2-story sheds? Like, you see, this is actually like this is actually. I know you talked about the Collison thing with this and all, didn't you? It wasn't
Mm.
you. I think you talked
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
yeah. They were, pushing this as a quote unquote solution. It's not a solution. This is a way of basically normalizing the impoverishment of people in the younger demographic. It's unethical and it's fucking wrong. It's absolutely wrong. Like, the fact that they even have the fucking balls to put themselves forward for elections while pursuing this kind of nonsense, as if this, like, what about all the sewage? What about all the electronic? How do you, like, when you wire a house as an electrician, like, you have to, if you're going to have another house in the garden drawing power from that house, like, that's creating all this electricity demand. Will the wiring handle it? You're going to have to upgrade all kinds of things. Sewage systems are going to have to be put in to handle all the sewage, like, all the traffic, extra traffic. You want to have 2 families on one house. Where are all the cars going to go?
Hmm.
Like, all of this. This is the worst kind of planning you could really do. Like, everything about this is mean spirited, and it's designed by people who don't actually know anything about construction. Like, basically, and then when you think about the logic of this, like, do any of the people pushing this as a solution actually live in sheds?
Yes, that's the big thing. Yeah. So you name it. Like, what's your man's name? Sean Keys, right? Progress Ireland. Who I saw him years ago. He did an interview with Peter Ryan, the
Oh yeah.
American guy. And, Peter Ryan was kind of just speaking to him at a technocratic level about we need to get trains in towns and all, that kind of stuff. But whenever Peter kind of veered into, like, anything resembling nationalism, he was saying stuff like, oh yeah, romantic nationalism, like rolling his eyes at it all. And he's working for these Collison brothers, and it allegedly, right? Progress Ireland is, I'm pretty sure, funded by those guys, right? And come on, that guy can't believe what he's saying. I'm like, he's not dumb. Like, he knows what we can see here as well. Like, um, and sneering about it. Now, I can bet he's, sounds probably posh enough kind of guy in this kind of institutional world. Not no normal lad ends up in this kind of slimy world, right? Um, I'm sure he's not living in a shed. Pater Tobin, who said, "Oh, we just need to do it" or whatever. Pater Tobin's not living in a shed. If you suggested the very thing to him, he'd laugh at you. If you said, "What about your kids? How about your kids live in a shed?" No, no, they're grand. They're taken care of. Um, yeah, I'm just basically saying what you said, but it's like none of
Take
these people will do
remigration
that.
myself, like,
Pardon?
I'll take remigration personally, like,
I'll
I'd
take
have
that, and just
all the
honestly,
natives and have
just
a
like,
house, like.
just utter revolt, like within the limits of the law of what I can say or whatever, peaceful dialogue or whatever, but like, as a form of revolt, let's just say, like, countries have gone into crisis, let's call it, for much less. I mean, the sheds thing should have really. This is like the problem of, as Bowden called it, de-democratization or whatever. Or if you look at Fianna Fáil's talking about stakeholder, kind of blob absorbing everything, or the left being involved in that too, and the right being sloppy list. Whatever this whole process we've talked about has got us so on our fucking knees and so isolated from each other, and incapable of gathering, organizing, and even talking really, um, and organizing politically in some fashion, even just having salons in your local town where you can, I don't mean like a hair salon, but like a, an intellectual salon or whatever, a place where you can go and meet with people who live near you, who you agree with me, don't you? We kind of are seeing the same things. You can't even do that because you'd be harassed or something. Um, we're so low that there wasn't a peep. People online said, "Oh, beds and sheds." Well, all the foreigners are getting the houses on X. End of story. Like, it should have been a lot more serious than that. This is so galling, and yet nothing in reality. Loads on X, nothing in reality. Just
Yeah,
on and on.
yeah.
That's the crux of the problem. How do you get past that? I don't know. Systems designed against it. It has its immune systems in place, but it can only get so humiliating.
Like at a
Really,
certain point, like what you're saying there, like has to be at some point. Surely there has to be a uh, a backlash. Like, how can young people like go along with this? Like,
yeah,
I find it amazing. Like the compliance, and obviously the left are kind of are making hay with it, like because they're kind of if you call it leftoidism or whatever, where it's like you have Rory Hearn or whatever going around talking about gaps and we just need to do this.
yeah.
It's all, and that's all. See, that's their version of rightoidism. Like there is
Oh,
that.
totally. 100%. The reason I talk about rightoidism these days is because, one, I'm kind of associated with it, and two, because I've already discussed leftoidism ad nauseum.
Yeah,
Like, I think a lot of people get it. It's just the second part of the puzzle now is the rightoid side. But the Rory Hearn fella is desperate. Like, 200,000 people come into the country on a year or whatever, 100, lots of people. And he must know. It's the same with Sean Keys with Progress Ireland. They know. But again, they're obviously stakeholders to some extent, and Rory Hearn is not living in a shed.
He's
He's
marketing
not.
the message. Like,
And his reward is to not live in a shed. You get to come in the big house or have your own big house.
and see that whole idea of the shed, like that is such a short term thing that gets the government out of trouble. And that's why anyone supporting it, I'm skeptical of. I'm like, why are you supporting this? This actually shores up the government's
It
policies.
does, yeah. I would rather the pressure build and it just be for what it is, and come to a head rather than sort of paper over the cracks with things like that.
Yeah.
It's very, very bad. But I mean, I don't know, and I think that should have been much more of a thing. But again, the problem comes back to, like, I shared a thing there with uh, what was it, support of the fuel protests by party, and all the people who supported it in big numbers were from Independent Ireland all the way down to PBP. So there's a broad coalition of disaffected people,
Yeah.
which
I
is
saw
a
that
lot of people.
actually very interesting. And I thought at the time actually of the protest, I was kind of pointing this out like that what the establishment, so to speak, would fear would be that people on the far left and far right stopped arguing about that and focused on like, well, let's actually do something about a couple of these issues,
Yeah, it's like the cringe meme you mentioned earlier with a MAGA hat guy and a blue-haired feminist, and they say
together,
they
together.
got you fighting among yourselves when you're in a
They're trying to
sandbox.
divide us. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's true though. It's real. It's like, look, 97% of Sinn Féin support that. Most of Sinn Féin oppose immigration. I mean, the people who support them.
Yeah, the actual
That's
people do, yeah, not the part, not the top
and
part. Yeah,
and most people who support Ain 2 don't agree with Pader Tobin on crushing the far right. He's talked about that, right? Basically,
yeah,
I mean, where's that coming from? So again, it's the institutional factor is at odds with the reality. The most of us, and in that graph or that poll. So on one side you have Ain 2, PBP, Independent Ireland. In there would be the National Party. All that whole constellation. And it's very generational as well, of course. If you were to do that by under 40, it would look even stronger. And then on the other side, you have the Greens, Social Democrats, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, boomers, people who are well off, people who are creaming it from the system and the status quo. And the problem is Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Social Democrats and Labour are all one big cozy club, really, right? The initiated. Whereas on the other side, PBP, and I'm not talking about the party, Paul Murphy, I'm talking about the general likes who would support them. Paul Murphy and Mary Lou McDonald and Pader Tobin, that's the mess. Is the how could we get it to integrate that whole side of the thing? It might sound like a fool's errand, but it's like all of the support is there among the same people, and they all agree. The average Sinn Féin voter, or even some PBP voters, possibly, who are just concerned about companies being evil or whatever, not Paul Murphy, but the actual randomer, they wouldn't be all that bothered about if you're against immigration and you know what I mean. You don't think Indians are Irish or whatever. It's all a little bit contrived, really, and it's a case of breaking through that because
Yeah,
it's the only way.
arguing with each other about shite,
Yeah.
and just make a deal. Like, we're just not going to go at each other the whole time. How about that?
Well, that's the thing. I have a little list of how could it be possible? Because it's utopian to think it's even possible, and maybe it is impossible. But if you were to do that, let's say Ty Hickey came out and said, "Fair play to the fuel protesters. I don't care if you're far right or far left." I posted another guy earlier who said something similar. You know, so let's say you take that idea, you go, yeah, let's have conversations. What will be the ground rules? How do we agree on terms without falling out about the very terms themselves? And that's the conundrum. I would have for the right oid giving up the sort of performative sadism. It's just silly.
Yeah.
The billionaires defending capitalism effectively. And I'm not talking about the lemonade stand or the plumber or whatever. I'm talking about finance capitalism, big capitalism, and Zionism. And then the leftoids would have to. I don't think the link between leftoids and NGOs can be tolerated. If you're working for some state activist group thing and you're coming in trying to put a stick in the spokes, we know why you're doing that. And the left have to acknowledge that they are bought out via these NGOs, academic positions, media, and all of that. They would have to give up immigration, not let's remigrate everyone, fuck all foreigners, they're all low IQ, la la la. You don't have to buy into all that, let's say rightoid stuff. But in general, immigration has to be halted, reversed, whatever. And I would say as well that no platforming, guilt by association, you said this, you said that.
I think it should be a new article inserted into the Irish Constitution specifically protecting free speech. That's what I would love to see. Like an actual. I saw, your man Michael Reiner's in England. He has an idea for that in England. Like, I think it's a great idea. Like,
and in the workplace as well.
Everywhere, pure, especially for politics.
Yeah. What's the word? What is the? Oh, struggling for the word now. It's retribution or whatever. Basically, being retaliated against by your work or really anything else for what is your view. You're allowed to have your view. It's not a democracy if you can't have your view. It's a complicated issue, free speech, because of course it can't be absolute. But I would say in spirit, at least, until we can adjust the constitution, if we're having tentative sort of, because we're all sad to see the shed thing happen. We're all sad to see Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael crack down on people. I'm sure many on the left are sad to see the left in such disarray, which is why they're kind of trying to reach out to the right. I don't know, is it entryism or is it just genuine?
I think with your man Murphy and all, like, I think he actually is connected to the ground enough to know that was an organic outpouring and that he can't afford to ignore them. Like, and he's seen it as an opportunity to reach out, because obviously he's a militant anti-racist. Like, I know this, but at the same time, he is attempting to basically reach a constituency there, and he's saying, well, these are clearly this is not some artificial put on kind of event. Like, this is very much, these people are have real grievances, and so him having to actually acknowledge their grievances, I think that's a major step.
It's either scheming or it's acknowledging weakness and just accepting it. It's one or the other, a mix of both.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't, with him personally, I don't know if it's coming from a place of that much integrity. But I wouldn't. If he came out tomorrow and said, "Look, I'm willing to have a conversation," I would be like, "Look, I'm not particularly a fan of yours, but I will have the conversation," or whatever. He's a particularly tough example, but let's say, the problem is with this, with this left-right thing that's kind of in the air a little bit, and it is just necessary, but to some extent, the problem is I saw your man Laszlo, right, the
Mhm.
ex Trinity SU guy,
Mhm.
and he's talking about how the left have abandoned the working class by calling them all racist and all that, and we all hear that and we go, "That's excellent, right? That's great progress."
Come in and lead
Um,
our movement, Laszlo.
Yeah, but that's the thing, and also our movement is led by abject sloppyism anyway. So there's not much in a sense to take, to some extent. But let's say you go, you're not saying come in and take our movement, but we're eager to, without being naive, we're eager to hear that. Like that's good progress, and we'll meet you halfway and let's have conversations. But then I don't know how exactly it happened, but he's in O'Connell Street then calling Phil Dwyer a dog kicker and
Yeah,
accusing Phil of trying to take over grassroots populist revolt with his
yeah.
far right stuff.
I didn't
And I
like
kind
that
of
at
go,
all.
see,
Yeah,
there
very
you go.
nasty.
Straight away, you're into this kind of stuff. If we're reaching out the hand, what's that about? Like, I don't know now. Like, did Phil do a bit of partisan provoking? I didn't see it all. I don't know.
I
I'd have
watched
to
that
ask.
because I did that. Someone sent me that clip and I checked it out on Phil's stream, like, and it was very obvious that Phil is just there filming everyone. He's doing
Mhm.
his thing where he goes around and he talks to anyone that walks past. He'll talk to them, like, and your man came over very specifically to insert himself into a conversation that Phil was having with someone else,
Yeah.
and basically started with all this kind of smart ass shit. Like, and I'm like, okay, this guy is here to undermine nationalists. I don't trust him at all.
Well, again, the problem is that it leads to, your man's trying to float his like, oh, this is far right or whatever, and then Phil is doing the whole, well, how am I racist? What did I say? And you're into this shit show then, whereas it's like, and I agree, your man Laszlo seemed to instigate it, but it's like, see, this is the problem, right? You know, this can't work. We can't be doing this. You're saying the left have abandoned the working class and they're needlessly partisan and all the rest of it, but then you jump in to this moment and try and have a personal thing with, that's not very diplomatic. You could have just said, hey, where do we agree? Let's, and the key thing was accusing Phil of um trying to stick his oar into it. It's like, bro, the left have been on the outs for years. You've acknowledged that, and then the first thing you try and do is come in and try and grab the baton, selfishly, and it's like, no, that's not really. That looks like entryism straight away, as opposed to diplomacy. The other one was maybe in Waterford or somewhere. One of the National Party lads, maybe McLaughlin or one of them,
Yeah, it was.
you saw that spectacle
Yeah.
where some Sinn Féin or whatever get up on the stage and classic kind of like mob stuff, like stirring the mob. Because you can easily get, like, I can go, you and me can be in a crowd and you try to say something, and I go, we don't want your type around here, Peter. And the crowd, without even barely knowing what's going on, if they hear a yelp from the left of them, they all yelp and, yeah, get out of here.
That
Who are
was
we shouting at?
pathetic, like,
Your man kind of played that and tried to have this big, what is it, Antifa moment against McLaughlin or whoever it was. And I actually read on from the comments, people were saying, no, the crowd told your man to fuck off as well shortly after. So it's like, why didn't you get up on stage with McLaughlin and say, listen, you and I don't agree on everything, but we have one real enemy, and let's unite, right? On that, we don't have to be besties, but let's agree on a certain amount of things. At the first given opportunity, he was trying to make a show and trying to go back to the far right. The far right were chasing them out and all this. That's the problem. Is that I'm perfectly
they're
aware of
hijacking
this.
what's in, they're like that's them hijacking. They're masters of doing that, like just taking over
Yes.
a thing and making it. Then you'll end up with a thing like with the water protests where people
Mhm.
were angry, and then you had Paul Murphy and Brendan Ogle of the trade unions, basically public service trade unions, come in basically and take it over, and then it's all like everyone has a right to water, everyone has a right to this, and then you end up with these things like, oh, we're going to have a right to housing in the Constitution. Well, the funny thing was, we weren't homeless when we didn't have that in the Constitution,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which
Um,
only guarantees that they're going to hand people the right to housing when they come on off of an airplane. That's what that's for.
yeah.
So yeah, like, and I saw that with McLaughlin. I tweeted at some of those Shinner accounts on X and all, little rat bastards that they are, like going on about that, like trying to make out like, oh, we kicked them out and all. It's like,
Yeah.
first of all, Sinn Féin have enough fucking illegal diesel in fucking up in God's country, like they could probably solve the fuel crisis for 6 months on their own.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. No, they could like the Strait of Hormuz kind of balance it out. Like,
yeah,
um, but that's the thing is there has to be sort of a sort of a ground rule kind of thing. And again, rightoids then would tell me, "Oh, you're naive. You know, these leftists are woke, whatever's," and it's kind of like I'm not saying I'm being doe-eyed and I want to do this for the crack or for the sense of some sort of camaraderie. It just needs to happen. It's not even about left and right. These ideologies are kind of irrelevant, as we know from looking at the gap between what supporters believe and. It's like I'm not trying to say let's bring Julius Evola and Karl Marx together. It's not like ideological like that. Um, it's just a general sense of like breaking down the barriers of conversation, of getting together in some way. um until you break that, it's we're totally screwed. Even if you got out of it, it would be a big hill to climb, but without doing that, it's dead on arrival. So it has to happen, and I'm kind of open to it. But if we have these like the likes of Laszlo, who sounded good, all right, and then took his mom. There was no need for that.
I thought that was very sly, and it really says to me that communicates a lot to me, like about someone's character and what their motivations are.
Exactly, is it? And that's what the motivation. I don't know about him. I'm not reading his mind, but when
I
you
am
see
not
this kind
reading
of
his
stuff, but like, here's me just trying to be diplomatic to a fault, right? But you know, you start to get the impression, the classic thing of these people. I won't even call them leftists. It's just this kind of institutionally affiliated thing. It's all about power. Um, your man, what's his name? Connor Reddy. You know that guy?
I don't know
PPP.
the name. Yeah, yeah.
I think that's his name. I'm not quite sure. It's something Reddy. It might be Connor Reddy. I remember a couple of years ago being down at, where was it? Some sort of protest down by the Custom House, and I said to him again, right order will accuse me of being naive and cocked out for doing this, but I said to him, you know, you'd call me far right, right? Uh, but and I don't agree with your stuff or whatever. And we were actually down by the Custom House, so you could literally look onto the IFSC, the power center, right, kind of thing. And I said to him, we can't be here bickering. We should find unity against that. We have to. And I can't remember exactly what he said to me, but some little sly derogatory kind of leftoid remark. And I just remember the feeling of, not personally, I don't give a shite, right? What some little fucker like him says to me in the moment, but just the sense of defeat, not from whatever your man rejects, the olive branch, from the IFSC. I thought, oh fuck, like if this is what we're stuck with, you can't actually just look someone in the eye and go, I mean, what exactly is the issue? Your leftoids are completely hapless and powerless. This is why they're reaching out to the right and the national populism, because they know they have nothing. And it's kind of like, okay, fine, reach out, but don't do it's power. It's just power. They just like, in a large way, they just want to steal the power, through entryism now, but because they don't have anything themselves, they have no popular base at all, really now. And I'm just looking at that, going, yeah, you don't. And rightoids, it won't cut it alone. It just has to happen, and yet you're fucking it up. So my appeal would be to any genuine leftoid or leftist or whatever you want to call it. They have to do the work. It is kind of on them. It's really not on us at all, for them to demonstrate, any ones of them that are sincere. Basically, my thing would be: are there any sincere people among you who have the balls to go about it properly, to have conversations? And it starts with just conversations. Show us that you're willing to have conversations out in the open, without trying to, wrestle for power at the first moment. See if you can do that, and then we can talk. But it is on them. The onus is on them now. They bear the responsibility for these sheds and for all the rest of it. really. Because we know Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, the Gambins, the banks, the Zionists, the American regime, we know what they are. It's the leftists who claim to give a shit about these things. It's on them. Because without a sort of a coalition forming that doesn't break apart on day one, then we are going to be in the shed. All of us, left, right, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
That's a good and the way I would look at it, to sum up all that, like I think entryism is a very real possibility with all that. So I'd be very weary of actually reaching out to the left. To be fair about it, I really would. Like, I think we just have to.
I am too. Maybe I know we'll wrap it up probably, but like, you know, maybe I'm wrong, and there's no need for that, and just plow on independently. You know, it's
you have to make it more powerful, like that they have to conform to. If you try and conform, like if you try and go to them on, like they will always insist on their shit. Like, so, you know, I think the fact that they're having to bend a little bit, like on some of those protests and everything, that's a good sign. And you just have to keep
making them bend.
Making them bend, like, you know, just destroy them basically.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those kind of game theory conundrums, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember, like, you have to keep the prize in mind, like, about what we're actually doing here, you know. And like the whole populist thing, like, is obviously a problem that we're facing now, like, and you know, it draws certain people in, like, but it doesn't kind of produce what needs to be produced, like, and it kind of keeps you in this kind of hamster wheel of you know, kind of slop entertainment or slopulism, or you know.
Do you know, one of the reasons why I have an interest in the left is not just, we need a numbers coalition and all of that. One of the reasons if my ideal of it were possible, it might be naive or whatever, but let's say it were, you could get a certain amount of that, which there is some. It would almost purge or sort of shear off the rightoidism from the right, or from nationalism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But through that, whatever combative or engaging process, that if the left could, obviously they can criticize the capitalism, the Zionism, the performative, say that they kind of would be a natural pole against that. And of course, the nationalists and the kind of rightoids are a pole against the naivety and the puppet-esqueness of leftists. You know, so there's a sort of there's something in theory to be gained by the mix of the two, but obviously that's not reaching out to Paul Murphy, but but you know, there's something, I can't quite articulate it, but it's a sort of a way of the process. If you could have those conversations, would kind of shear off some of the nonsense on the right. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. No, I know what you're saying. Like, I agree. Like, there has to be an improvement in the you have to kind of get away from, like, this is what, look, the theme of tonight's stream started out with post-MAGA, and that's kind of what you're kind of looking forward to there. You're looking forward to what's going to happen because Trump is an old man. He's going to be out of office within 2 years. He could even be out this year. You know what I mean? So, like, this whole, like, thing that we kind of see as being connected with what he did, like, in America, and the American kind of scene around Trump, that kind of GOP, mainstream kind of GOP kind of thing, that whole thing has spawned some of this kind of populism in Ireland, you know, particularly post-COVID. It seems to have this era stuff kind of comes along, and it's all very content free, like, it's very meaningless, a lot of it, and very, very much just about personality and, you know, make Ireland great again. It's like even the slogan doesn't really make sense, like, because, you know, it's so obviously just taken from the American make.
It's mental.
There's no real thought gone into, like, how that relates to Irish history or anything, you know. So that kind of is a nice symbol of, like, how content free it all is, like, and we're gonna have to separate ourselves from all of that. You know, I think the National Party is good. Like, I do support them. Like, and like, I think that's because they have an idea of what they're trying to do. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they know
they do, yeah.
we're nationalists. Like, first of all, they're nationalists. Like, if you can't say you're a nationalist And then you have all these other parties that kind of come along and say, well, we're not going to go as far as this and that. And then you have all the kind of the A&2s and the independent Ireland who are kind of like, they'll select certain issues, like, and they're good on certain issues, but they won't just be a nationalist party.
Here,
You
the Independent Ireland are the biggest shower of gone beans I've ever seen in my whole life. Like, I mean, what did someone say? They, you know, I mean, they're basically Lowry and the lads, those type of people. Yeah, it's not National Party are the are the closest thing to anything legit we have.
yeah,
I mean, I look across the board, not even political parties, just any kind of constellation or grouping of people. Um, yeah, it's the National Party is the best gig we have. I mean, I saw their thing in Cork recently; it was good. There's some good speeches there, but I would, if anyone were to be the vehicle for that sort of encompassing of a sort of a, you know what I'm getting at with this intellectualized critique, this kind of
mm,
broader thing about capitalism, almost like the best elements of left stuff,
yeah,
including probably in order to appeal to the Irish masses, and also just for maybe moral reasons as well, and political. For every the likes of basically staying away from the Israel stuff,
yeah.
being, I mean, I think taking an open anti-American regime position across the board, all that kind of stuff, then you have the best game in town, you know?
Yeah, and I mean the trouble with the right-eyed thing is that it prevents you from doing that. Like, it prevents you from actually being critical when America is wrong. Like, and being critical of Israel. Like, why are we tying ourselves to this? Like, why would you do that? You know,
Yeah,
like,
and personally, like if the whole country is like up in arms about Palestine being genocided, well, lean into it. Why not? I mean, give me a good reason why not.
even if you didn't believe it, even if you're just a cynical political operative.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Even just that alone, I personally don't consider myself a cynic that way. I do. I'm against it, right? But even if like so, there's no good reason, bar the rightoid matrix that interferes with these things. Then there's no logical reason to look a gift horse in the mouth, even just at a cynical level, and besides a moral or any other. So things like that, just completely escaping the grip, the pervasive grip of any hint of that stuff, the international right, the international rightoid thing.
yeah,
Um, I think that's important for any nationalist party. So you've the Gombeans in independent Ireland, you've the A2 and all that, but National Party are good. They're very good. And I think probably if there's to be any kind of vehicle, any kind of anything that we can kind of glom around, it's that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
indeed, and yeah, and that's it. Like, and we have to kind of take on that. You have to take it. First of all, you have to understand the situation, and you can't do that from a strongly um from a from a political position, basically, that automatically prevents you from thinking about certain subjects. Like, you have to look at things as dispassionately as you can and objectively as you can, like, and just and be honest about things, and taking on this kind of right-eyed or left-eyed position of militant anti-racism on the one hand, or in the right-eyed, which is like it's all about Muslims or it's all about brown people or whatever. Like, you're not actually looking from things from your own perspective at all. You're just being instrumentalized by some power block somewhere to do a certain thing, like, and that's not no good. Like, so yeah, that's what has to happen. But we do have there's people have been commenting. I'm not going to read all these comments, but just before we log off, it's been going a fair length now. Actually, I didn't
Yeah.
realize I've been going on ages. So uh, people are talking away in there about stuff. Yeah, on Vor is there. Did Trump not say he wanted to do something with the price of housing, but couldn't, wasn't let do it effectively? Well, yeah, I mean, he might have said that, but Trump says things all the time. He just says stuff. This is my problem with Trump, is that Trump just says things to get out of situations in the moment. This is the problem. He's very fickle, and he just lies all the time. So you just, like, what Trump says means nothing to me. Like, it's just what he actually does is the
What he does.
problem.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, he has. Yeah, he says. Yeah, he agrees, and Um, and Chapman says Twitter was more fun when you could troll liberals. I'm sure it was. Yeah, more healthy as well, I'd imagine, because you're actually getting some kind of conversation. You know.
Yeah, there used to be actually good engagement, even if it was combative. You'd kind of have that process. It doesn't really happen anymore. I don't know, just siloing, I suppose.
Yeah. And about that account, Killian account we were talking about, someone says it said South Asia, or says someone Killian is from Rajasthan. Rajasthan. I believe it. And then Peter says, when I heard of John Waters' new show Unchained, I couldn't help but think of Killian. I don't know what that means.
He kept talking about chaining people to radiators and whipping them and stuff,
All right.
and like stripping them down and giving them a, like, I don't know, it was kind of erotic, some form of like demented homoerotic stuff to do with torture, effectively, of
Right.
like I don't know, leftists or something. I just you know,
Yeah, I know. A
it's sort
strange
of,
thing. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. Yeah,
and
strange.
yet like totally kind of being accepted as normal, really, like, you know, people sharing it and stuff, like what?
Yeah, why would you share this? Like, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
Unchained.
This guy
That's,
has how
yeah,
many? He has this insane amount of followers and everything. I'm like, how does he get it? Like, I've been on Twitter a year and a half, and I've got like barely. I broke 500, I think, the other week. Like, and I'm like,
hmm.
how did people get these big followings? Like with these slap accounts, is it just bots? Like, or what the fuck? Like, you know, like I don't tweet that much, but like, you know, and I try not. I actually don't like Twitter that much, but it's like it's a tool. But like the these like huge accounts like that, I'm like, how did he get that kind of account? Like for producing absolute shite, like you know.
Hmm.
Like he's not
Yeah.
giving any good analysis or anything, you know. Um,
His pin tweet is Milton Friedman. Um, yeah, in between radiator posting. Yeah, I'm looking for an example here, but I can't find one. Maybe he's evolved.
that's bizarre. I never knew this history, this lore with him. Like I wouldn't have, I didn't even think it was Anton when I brought it up. Uh, and then someone says, Chapman says, you make money out of X and YouTube if you are chosen to push a narrative. Maybe so. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. Um, and Radio Genoa is a terrible channel.
I mean, could that be any more on the nose as well, by the way? Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia.
Yeah.
Like, am I being too esoteric to kind of pick up on that? Or do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
the very same concept, effectively. And even using the same parlance. Radio Genoa.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, Radio Free Europe kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I've no doubt that we're in that domain. Like, I mean, any information technology is just going to be used like that. Like, they're going to have to, like, they're going to be monitoring stuff and using it. Like, you know, it's very obvious. Like, I think it's very obvious that's going on, really.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Even the search function is on Twitter is gammy these days.
Yeah.
Like, you can't put in a, you know, like a keyword of someone's handle and find it. You used to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Astrid Gale says the only thing with a lot of leftist analysis is that it originates in a very similar way a lot of the time. How much social status can I get, and what is the moral justification for having that? Well, that's indeed, yeah. I mean, if you look at if you kind of look at the academic literature, there is like analysis there, like of certain things. But yeah, absolutely, for the average person, kind of man on the street kind of guy that's kind of sees himself as leftist, yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. Like it's trendy kind of beliefs and it's social signaling, basically sophisticos as Bosco calls them.
um, Iran needs to be chained naked and made to beg for mercy. Replying to someone here says, "You sound like somebody who enjoys being tied/chained, fully and completely naked, to beds and being." I shouldn't be reading this. Is going to be clipped. I'm reading from a Twitter account here, and being
This is
brutally and
Killian, our friend.
mercilessly R-worded by third world migrants. It's, yeah. This kind of stuff, like on and on. I just looked up chained. You need to be chained to a chair and interrogated as thoroughly as possible until we've squeezed everything we can get out of you. and so on and so on.
I wonder if I started posting that shit, will I get a huge account?
Yeah, that's the trick.
We need to bring
Yeah,
Iran into the bedroom and tie it to a chair and waterboard it. Waterboard Iran hashtag or something like that.
yeah. We need to bring the left and naked into chained into a radiator or something. But like that's literally what he's posting. Anyway, sorry, I'll leave it. I'll let it go.
And on that bombshell,
Yes.
Ira Abu says common purpose is a hybrid Masonic Fabian outfit. Well, yeah, common purpose is kind of like the next stage in like managing the progressive kind of communications infrastructure. You know, kind of across the different sectors and everything. Multifactorial inculcation by different agencies. Yeah, yeah, it is. It's the organizing the different groups across society. He also
There
says
was
we lost the. Go ahead. Yeah.
no. Carry on. Sorry.
We lost the ability to tell stories. Stories transmit values, lore, beliefs, history, kinship.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very you don't get like it's not a whole lot of engaging poetry or anything, or art or whatever. It's not that I can see anyway. That's the other thing is the integration of everything. Art, every artist, every performer, everything in Ireland is a stakeholder. Like they can say
Yeah.
what they can say. You see with the TikTok influencers, the Garans. I've gone on about this enough before, but every one of them, they're on the brink of expressing themselves along with the funny jokes, and then they get reined in, and then you hear them on a Lucozade ad 2 weeks later. It's just the most pathetic thing ever. The people who have a glimmer of creative kind of content or whatever,
Mm.
and a spark in them, are integrated into Lucozade ads through some advertising agency or whatever that cracks the whip.
Yeah, I
And
mean, that would be worthy of a whole stream talking about how the arts is like a vehicle for the progressive state. You know, like because it really is. If you look at like it started with it was the AS Donna thing they did in the 90s. It was Haughey did that, wasn't it? In the 80s or
mhm.
whatever, they created AS Donna and all, and then they did the tax free thing like for artists. And then like, but these institutions like the Arts Council and all, they're really like they a lot of them are common purpose heads too, you know, so that they're really integrated like with politics like in a way which is not appreciated. So if you want to get like a career as an artist, like or a creative person, if you're in like crafts or something, you have to kind of, in order to get any of that exposure through things like the Arts Council, etc., or the theater, if you're into that kind of thing, um, doing film or whatever, music or whatever, you have to like have certain views. Like, and if you like, I saw it, your man, John, what's his name? John Connor, what's his name? What was the guy that was in Love Hate? Connors, what's his name? John Connor, wasn't it?
John Connors, yeah,
John Connors,
yeah,
yeah, sure it was, yeah.
yeah, that's
Actor,
it.
yeah. And there was the guy that the director guy that he worked with and all, like the two of them like have come out, like they've been I can't think of his name, my god. Ooh, he was talking to John Waters there a while ago now. But anyway, yeah. And he
Yeah,
was talking about all this, like, all this kind of like how this gatekeeping goes on in the arts, like, and how this kind of these narratives are just basically progressively just enforced through how art is produced, like through the institutions and everything. It's really, like they're dead on, like they're totally for real, like,
and it just like far from just ruining like or stymieing political propaganda or whatever, it just makes it shite. Like I don't know anything that I can watch or read or listen to that comes from or a film that's made, even a short film or anything that that's interesting. That you go, wow, that's a very good reflection of the society. The everything, like if you're looking at Denise Chila and this and that, I'm like, where is the. And funnily enough, this was a leftist who called me like a fascist and all this many times. But the film Garage and
Mm.
they there was the one, The Lonely Battle of Thomas Reed. They they were tame, like, but they kind of showed a certain timbre or veneer of Ireland that was a bit gritty and a bit real. And I look at these kind of, you know, shite towns around Ireland now, full of migrants and with like paint flaking off, and all the rest of it. It's like I just like to see a world reflected back at me through art, that it's not like an anti-migrant screed or something, but it just is real. Um, it's got a real veneer to it, and you just don't get that because the state has art so much by the balls, that it always has. It's just got this kind of saccharine quality to it always, and ideologically and aesthetically, it's just wrong. It's just not. It doesn't, because I don't know, the question of like what is art or what's it for or whatever. It doesn't reflect back and speak to me in any way. I mean, that's to put it mildly. It's like obscenely missing the mark. So you just can't. It's very hard to connect to any art. Maybe music, someone playing instrumental music is nice or whatever, because that's objective. But anything else that expresses the world back to you or whatever, you're just not getting it. It's just like there's a filter.
It's an artificiality to it all. You can't relate to it. Like, yeah, it was
It's just
Terry
the state.
McMahon, the guy, by the way. That was the guy I was thinking of. Terry McMahon and John
Oh
Connolly.
yeah, kind of long hair kind of guy. Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree that the art and like that is like there's whole courses taught at academic institutions on how to manage these kinds of institutions. Like a lot of them are trained in America and everything. So it's a whole rabbit hole you could go down. I'm telling you, it's really, it really interests me, all this stuff. Because it's so important, like this stuff is the stuff that you don't. It's not political on its face, but it actually by controlling it in this way, this kind of instrumental kind of control, like where it's not like a literal. You don't necessarily have to have like a man in a behind the curtain necessarily. You just have a set of values and
it's
and
also grants,
behavior.
like a system of like punishment and incentive, that kind of thing. So when Garen strayed off and talked about immigration, he was brought back with like, whatever, like spiralized talking about, afterwards, like he expressed himself and he just disappeared for 2 weeks, and then he came back and he's making videos for Yanks about like eating American candy and just inane kind of stuff. It's like that's someone actually who could have been something interesting, not a political bloviator, but just something independent, interesting, and was turned into a Lucasade merchant or whatever after the fact. Can I give one example of so as in the Garen thing is the punishment, and then the incentive is the grants, the advertising agencies that have you by the balls or whatever. Basically, you're going to be poor and homeless, or you can toe the line, keep it kosher, and maybe you'll eke out a living for yourself. Maybe you'll be in a house too, like Rory Hearn, and not out in the shed. So it's kind of they have people scrambling around that way. But the example I was going to give is Luke Kelly. It's a song called "Come Me Little Son," and it's a very touching song about, I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but he's basically talking about working on the motorways in England, and he doesn't get to see his kid because he has to go away to work or whatever. It's a real folk song of the people, song of the working man. A very touching song, and how basically, yeah, he's got that sort of lamenting about his son, and he's kind of singing it to his son. And I just thought, that is sad. Yeah, because of the economy and because of I'm trying to make a few bob and get by. But the modern version is, you don't have the son, and the childless person who's in the shed and is alienated in the town, and the society. I mean, the migrants is part
And
of
there's
it.
no socializing, you know what I mean? Like there's
No,
no
so,
like, because no one has any, like if you look at the wealth inequality intergenerationally, like people are complaining that like certain industries are dying out now. The cinemas aren't. No one's going to the cinema, for example. I'm told. Certain other things like bars are
yeah,
having a hard time because people can't
yeah.
afford to drink.
Who can afford to who leave the house barely? You know what I mean? Just leave the house, you end up spending €50 or whatever, just trying to get around and get a coffee and a snack or whatever for yourself and your family or whatever. So, like, I just thought of that song and I thought, how much worse is it now in a certain sense that you've so many people who are pushing towards their 40s, and they'll never, which they had a right to, really, which
Yeah,
is something as silly as, I don't know, just intimacy with their family, loving moments with their kids and stuff. They'll never have that. And like some people wouldn't have had children anyway, but for, I'm sure, about 80% of people who will remain childless now, that was actually economically enforced decision or a thing.
I'll
So it's
tell
like that Luke
you.
Kelly song on steroids. It's the saddest thing ever, and
Yeah,
yet I don't see a song coming out, hear a song or an artist who gets at it, because they would have to be careful not to talk about migration. Don't talk about this. Don't talk about that. Don't be dogging on the country too much, or it has to be in the right trendy leftoid way.
yeah.
You can't really get at the feel of it, properly.
No,
So
and
we
that's
get,
it. Like, but even the whole incel thing, like, is a weaponized narrative targeting people who are isolated socially. Like,
hmm
I think that's one of the most subversive things they've done, because I can see that as a deployed narrative very clearly. Like, you basically take young men who are the real change agents in any society, or young men
hmm
basically, and you basically say to those, like, what young fella is getting enough sex anyway? I mean, if you're like,
yeah,
you're supposed to want sex, like, you're supposed to be horny, like, there's nothing wrong with that, like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, the pathologization basically of these young people, like, and saying there's something wrong with you, like, you know there's nothing wrong with you. You are living in a society where people are atomized and isolated socially. That's what's happened. There is
yeah,
less social activity happening because, one, you can't afford to, and two, because we're supposed to be kept in our fucking in our sheds so that we don't interact with each other. you know and this, like, I think it's very obvious, like, the reason people aren't having families is not because of, like, apps necessarily, or not because of porn. It's because people are socially isolated. That's why, you know and those are
mm,
symptoms of things which feed on social isolation, if you're on your own or whatever. But no,
yeah.
it's like, but like, the way they go after young men for that, like, I think that's fucking disgusting, like, to be honest, because, like, yeah, I'm sure there are people who hate women or whatever. What fella hasn't hated women at some point in his life after a breakup, or, a bad.
And vice versa. It's
Vice
it's
versa,
it's
totally, yeah.
yeah. That's the story of life. Like, but yeah, the atomized young man or whatever turning, like, isn't it ironic, like, that the system, which is like major banks and all the rest of it, right? The system writ large, demonizes a guy who is in his, like, single mothers, aging boomers, like, box room in the house, completely disenfranchised and alienated and a bit angry about it. And suddenly he's the great enemy.
Yeah,
It's twisted, like, really.
it is. It is.
But again, this is like, art could speak to this, but we don't have that song. Come Me Little Son, Luke Kelly, beautiful song. People
Mm.
after this go have a listen to it, but we don't have that now. So to answer, I think it was a chat
Yeah,
question or comment. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. That's very good. Uh, Lashaway also says, in relation to your essay, Don, have you done any reading on Tavistock? I have done a bit of reading on Tavistock. I know they're involved in the trans thing and everything. They were closed down in England, but, like, even deeper, there is a deeper rabbit hole. I do think people maybe sometimes get a bit caught up on Tavistock, and maybe there's a bit of a conspiratorialization of some of it, where it becomes, it's a bit like the WEF, where people will kind of uh, presented in a certain kind of a light, based on a kind of a series of things that they think of. For example, like, I know the most famous book on Tavistock that people cite, like, is the John Coleman book. He was a conspiracy writer, and he wrote a couple of books, one about the Club of Rome and one about Tavistock and a few other things. But basically, I find him a little bit problematic with some of his research. Some of it's you can verify, but a lot of it isn't cited, so you don't really know if what's accurate. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Tavistock is just, it's all about social dynamics and group dynamics and all that. So, but there's a lot of other institutions that were set up not long after that, which are also really interesting. And I think I think next week I'm going to be doing a stream with Bosco where we'll be talking about facilitation, and I think we'll be talking about some of that. So you might enjoy that one. Um, Afghanistan banjo music is a bit like Irish rebel music, apparently. I don't know. I wouldn't be an expert. Uh, Chapman says most Irish comedy produced by RTE throughout the years has been Class Hat Red, directed at Culshies and Scroats. I was thinking that during the week, actually. That's a great point. That has there ever been, like, an RTE satirical, like, sitcom or something like that, or piss take of, like, posh Dublin people? You know, like
Maybe
it's,
Ross O'Carroll Kelly, maybe.
but that's not RTE though, is it? Like that's a book.
Oh yeah, yeah, true.
But yeah, that was a runaway hit as a book. The series of books, and my friend was obsessed with that. He had every book, like, and because he knew a lot of these people growing up, like he's like, this is exactly like they are, like, and I've always thought it was amazing that they never made like a TV version of that.
Yeah, or even something like White Lotus, kind of actually same idea, which is like not amazing or anything, but yeah, kind of taking the piss out of the the kind of upper crust and their funny sensibilities and the hypocrisy of it. And, even something like that, pretty mild, but it's a funny little jab. Yeah, you don't even see anything along those lines.
Yeah. No, it's very true. I think there's a real class thing with the kind of media, like, it's very unexplored. Like, I think like those are the real taboos in Irish society. I think like things like that, you can't, they're just not touched, like, and they're not touched because no one interested is getting anywhere near the cultural machinery to do anything like that. Um, okay, and it also says, you're 40 now, son, and you have finally your first home in a diverse estate. Time to start a family. That's what
If
we're
you're
doing.
lucky. If
Yeah,
you're lucky.
yeah. You better marry a Zoomer, I can tell you. Uh, do you have 500,000 to buy a 3-bed semi D? It's so true. It's so fucking crazy. Sleeping in vans in Kildare, Greenfez says. Um,
I've seen actually speaking of RTE, you'll have like some show. They had the guy, he's another one of these kind of online content guys. He did some funny videos. They all do to start with. He'd do like impressions of northern I can't think of the guy. He's one of these anyway, kind of like Garen or one of these, ended up on probably Lucas ads, but um he I saw a show where it was like a lifestyle show where he was being shown by this woman who lives in a van what living in a van is like. And they were
mm,
saying, oh, there's a lot of cost of living, right? Crisis. Here's what some plucky young people are doing. And he's like, oh, what's it like? And he's like touring around being like, let me see. So shall we go in? And she goes, yeah, sure. And they hop in the thing and he goes, oh, it's very cramped, but I can see where you're coming from. It's like, that's what you're feeding us. Fucking impoverishment content. Like as if it's kind of like light and funny or something, It's like this should be a lot more serious, like, you know what I mean? And they've brought the content creator guy in to kind of laugh at it and go, geez, that's mad. This is
yeah.
crazy. Crazy house prices. That kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
like making it not serious, like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
exactly. It's deadly serious, like, really. But
because you only
yeah.
have about 20 years to get that shit done, like, and
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
you think of the fertility window for women, and it's like most of these women are going to be going to university, so they're going to be a couple of years there where they leave school, go to university. Are they going to get a boyfriend in university? Are they not going to have one? Then they have to go into the world of work, and then they have to find a job. Then they have to move again. You move for university, you move for your job a few times, maybe. You do a bit of traveling. Oh, I'm 30. Shit. Like, this is like real life. Like, and we don't take it seriously. Like, in the liberal societies in the West, we just do not take this stuff seriously, which is why immigration has been so normalized here, because you
Yeah.
simply can't say, like, it doesn't come into the administrative mind in the West like that. Actually, we're actually kind of sterilizing our own people.
Oh,
You know?
100%. Sure. Like, why do you think they're, you know, pushing? I'm not like a religious anti-contraceptionist or something like that. It's a modern world, whatever, but like it's one thing for the state to allow it or something like that, but they push it so enthusiastically. Condoms and pills and free, free, free. But if you try to get a medical appointment for asthma attacks or something, that's not free. But if you need to come in for a birth control pill, that is, it's clearly there's an enthusiasm behind that. Um, and there's sterilization economically by virtue of everything else.
Yeah. See, I
We're
think
definitely being sterilized, like in many different forms.
liberalism is sterile. You see, this is the thing. This is one of the things I've really come to understand over the research for the education thing and everything, going into like the origins of some of these things. Like, is that um, liberalism, it cannot produce anything. It's kind of like E. Michael Jones used to go on about this a lot, like in his books and all, like, and in his interviews, like, where he'd be going on about like what the nature of capitalism and all, and like he was talking about like how the progressive society like seeks to basically control, like, in this, and it all goes back to that birth control and all. It comes out of that kind of ethos. Like, it's all progressive stuff, you know. And it's like, you know, you're getting sexual liberation, but you're actually, yeah, what they mean is you can have gay sex, or
Yeah.
you can masturbate on your own, like, but you know, you can't actually just have a family, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can do anything except
Yeah.
have a family.
I like that Michael Jones line. He says sexual liberation is political control, I think.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
Liquidating.
an interesting one.
Yeah, that book is
'Cause
amazing. Like, yeah,
I haven't read it. I've just heard they call it a slogan. And
yeah.
it's like I've rattled that around in my head a few times when I see certain things, and it's like that's you know, on the face of it, you could kind of go, "Well, I mean, what's that mean? Like, you know, how does that necessarily follow?" But it sort of seems to follow. Um,
Yeah.
as a slogan, it makes sense. It's like even
What
if you
is,
don't read any further, you're like going, "Okay, well, I don't need it elaborated on," but it seems to be the case.
this gets back
Um,
to what we were saying earlier about how the rightoid is emotional and controlled by his emotions. But that's basically what he's saying with libido dominandi, like, and the political sexual freedom liberation is political control. What he means is that you're being allowed to do these things so that you're distracted from the important things and
yes.
the real meaningful things in life. Like, so you can have all of the gay sex you want, but you're going to have to live in a usurious society where your house is artificially inflated out of your ability to buy it. Like,
Hmm.
you know, and so
Yeah.
he, you know, he has a whole
And
theory.
also there's something to be said for sexual liberation is sort of the opposite of like runs in an opposite direction to um obviously bonds and connection and like
Mm.
the likes of that, you know, like you hear it with it's like tangential, but people saying like anti-natalist stuff, which I understand because of the economic pressure. I get it, but when
Decoupling
people
sex from procreation.
well, like when but you know, when people say, "Oh, I don't want a kid. I don't want to have to be responsible for someone like that," or what I have to change. They scream at me and they do all this, that, and the other. That sounds horrific, or whatever. It's like, well, you know, when your parents get old and you have to change their nappies, that's yucky too, or whatever. But it's like, yeah, but we have an obligation to each other, do we not? You know, like some sort of obligation, some sort of, or what else? You know, if we don't, then we are slaves, aren't we? Because someone's going to have to look after you when you're old, and someone had to look after you when you were a kid. And even though at a primal level, everybody wants to have sex all they want or whatever, that doesn't correspond to um, having bonds with other people and sort of establishing, making choices, making sacrifices, making commitments. Um, it's sort of at odds with that. So I see that. I think it extends out beyond just sexual liberation. It's kind of like liberation from each other entirely.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's it. Like the liberal project of like extending human rights, and they keep discovering, you'll notice, human rights that never existed before, but all of a sudden, some judge somewhere in some airport in Hawaii or whatever finds rights that some migrant has that are being infringed, and therefore, all of this thing you wanted to do with like deporting someone is illegal. You know, all of this, like, we're being, you're being, you're, I have a right not to have to look after my parents. Do you know what I mean? This is
Mm,
the attitude, like, you know. So everyone goes on about things like, oh, we need childcare. No, we need to have a society where women can just afford to raise their children at home in peace, and
mm.
have a network of community in place where they can share these things. But
Yeah, and the grandparents are there, and
yeah,
everybody's getting along, and then they
they're your
have
neighbors.
obligations to one another.
Yeah,
Um, it's kind of a liberation from that, and that is ultimate political control, of course. That's how
yeah,
you end up with the shed being you're in the shed while the house is liquidated, and you're all broken apart, smashed apart to bits.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's actually a really good insight. Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. Like, we're being broken down by liberalism. We're on in the, supposedly we're being liberated, and it's oppressive to women to allow them to stay home with their children and raise them.
Hmm.
You know, but it's like, in reality, then what's happened? The state's coming in and it's saying, well, we're going to have to tax you to the hilt now again to pay for childcare, so your child can be raised by a stranger while you go out to work for Mr. Sheckelstein or whoever. Do you know what I mean? And it's like,
Exactly.
what is
And
this?
And by the way, you're going to have to come back from your work at 5 or 6 o'clock, and collect your kid from after school club, and then you have to get home and you still have to do the fucking dishes. Anyway, by the way, psych. So
And your relationship's under pressure now because you're not around each other enough. And anytime you're around each other, you're just arguing about who has to do this and who has to do that, and you can't afford, and you're having arguments about money and arguments about the house. And, all this stress is just piled on people now. Whereas the family unit used to always be an elderly grandparent in the corner in the fire,
yeah,
at the fire, you know what I mean? And that's normal. That's what life should be.
not in the fire. We're not at that point
Not in
yet.
the fire, yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
what the liberal society will do, Garo.
Yeah.
Biomass.
Biomass, green energy, and what's it called? Yeah, just euthanasia. But I've always thought the ultimate in terms of, you mentioned rights, the ultimate is the right to die. It's a gas, isn't it?
Yeah, you have the right now not to be a burden anymore, so we're just going to get rid of you.
Like the right to not exist, like to cease existing. That's framed as a right. And in fact, you see with the Netherlands and all that, because it's one thing for someone who's riddled with cancer and howling in pain or whatever, that's how it's presented. But before long, it's like, you live in a shed, you're depressed, out you go into the fire.
There's been cases where, like, there was a case there. What was that in Portugal, wasn't it? Or was it the young one?
Yeah. I was wary of that story because I was like, is this sloppyism, right-wing exaggeration? But I didn't actually bother looking into it.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah, I don't know.
To my shame. But yeah,
it looked horrible anyway. But yeah, I mean, yeah, and just so many things you could say. It's going on for 3 hours nearly now. Holy shit, more than 3 hours. Shit. Sorry about this. Yeah. Last Regale says Sanjay and Ramesh are at the door. They're interested in buying your shed.
3-person mortgage on the shed.
Yeah. Sheds under flyovers, another person says. From the river to the shed. Yeah, Flavellas, yeah. And it is like it's just the unshitification of Irish society.
It's off the wall. Like, it's fucking mad. It's actually funny. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, I'll say it's not funny, it's deadly serious, but it sort of circles back to just funny at a certain point as well. Like what's getting announced next week by some fucking Fine Gaeler with twinkly music as well. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and the guy is like the guy who filmed it, like the guy who was the advisor, media advisor for the politician, like, is on 100 grand shooting some YouTube shorts, like,
Yeah.
I need the cap cut for 10 minutes, like 100 grand a year, like, it's just unbelievable, like, this fucking bullshit country. Yeah, I want to read all these. Holy fuck, lads! Thanks for the comments, anyway. And then Mad for It asks, I'll answer this as a question: are you and the Last True Gael going to do a stream on the leftist takeover of football since the 1980s and the rock against fascism of that same era? That would be a very interesting stream. Yeah, I definitely would do that, actually. Yeah, if Last True Gael is up for it, give me a shout. But it'll be a few weeks because I have a few other streams to do in the next few weeks. But I definitely would do it because I have some material I'd love to talk about. Definitely, actually. Very cool. And I want to talk about the Coventry thing and all. I'm convinced that was a psyop. Like the specials and all that. That kind of ska music.
Do you know what? Like, for all my saying, we need to hybridize with elements of the left and all that. There's just such rich content to so much there, because it's the ultimate in, like, I don't know. Like, I've heard some of Last Regales talk about I think the English music scene, and I mean, there's so much there to look at, in terms of the so-called left, that it is hard to find a way to take any of it seriously. It's that kind of degraded and institutional. So yeah, I will listen to that.
Yeah, and we even got some comments on Rumble for the first time ever. Got a few comments on Rumble, so thanks for that, lads. We I think we hit 11 viewers at one point over there. That's a record. We got 8 now. Even got a couple on Odyssey, which never happens. So thanks, everyone. I suppose, we better just round it out here. We've been going for 3.5 hours. Thanks for doing that.
I've been staring at your sun a graphic there, just the lines going down.
Yeah,
I've been staring into that like the void for the last couple of hours here. It just dawned on me that I've been staring at it.
hypnotized.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Yeah,
Era MAGAism. And that lion is really doing it for me. That lion just cracks me up. Yeah, it's just so prideful, and it's like you could do a whole
so
stream about that, just talking about that, like the symbolism of MIGA.
yeah, mega. Yeah,
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. I think we did a good numbers on X as well. I think we did 190 or something, did we?
cool.
198 we're at now. Jesus, that's amazing. Yeah. Gearóid, Anthony, final comments you want to say? Let anyone know, Anthony, you've got coming up, or you want
Not really, to be
to?
honest. No, I'll try and do a few more streams. Maybe I've got a. I always have bad tech. I'm awful for it, but I'm trying to improve my signal or whatever. I've always have problems, but I'll work on that and try to come back a bit. But like I said to you before we went live, I would I would like to your thing on the education
Mm,
agenda.
yeah, yeah.
Something like that. Maybe in a few weeks, if you're stuck for a slot.
Yeah, yeah. No, we
Um,
definitely do a stream again, but that'd be interesting, yeah. And I
yeah,
mean, maybe I'll have some other stuff we could throw in there actually about that, because I could contextualize it a little bit more. The article that I did there was quite focused on that one particular thing, like, but yeah, no, we could definitely do some.
I like the idea of you work out an essay. I don't know anything about it. I don't read it, and then I come on and ask you to explain it to me. I
Yeah,
think that's a I think that's a good format for the odd stream.
yeah, that's an interesting one. Okay, yeah, I like that. And actually, I tell you, we do have yourself and Bosco now, we're going to be doing some interesting streams. And I also have an article coming out about the race relations stuff and all in Britain. And that's going to be really intense. So maybe we could do like a panel or something on that. I was thinking of how we're going to present that. I'll have to talk to you offline about that.
Mm.
But yeah, there's a lot of interesting material in that as well. Like, so maybe you'd be interested in that too. Um, but yeah, okay. Gearóid's links are there's a link tree, or not a link tree, there's a card.co link in the description to this video. All of his socials are there, Twitter, um, you got everything. You got YouTube, you got Rumble even actually, and a few other things. And mine is that I have a link tree there you can follow for me.
I got
So
banned from Linktree. That's
oh,
real. The real ones get banned from Linktree.
really?
Yeah, that's my
Oh,
big claim to fame. I was cancelled, man.
geez, I didn't
Yeah,
realize.
I just random. I'm still on YouTube. I'm still on everything, but randomly Linktree cut me out. So sure, look.
Wow, yeah, because I wasn't sure which one to choose. Like, I just set that up there a few months ago, and didn't realize. Yeah, I'll have to keep an eye on that. Yeah, okay. So yeah, you can find me on Substack. I'll be back in a week, I'm sure. With I think I'll be back with Bosco next week, and myself and Gearóid will definitely do another stream soon. So good night, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.